Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto fell in love with Lucy Heartfilia and got Harem? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Stranger in Harem. The end was not a bang. It was a tear. One moment, Naruto Uzumaki was a sun, a blazing avatar of life and will locked in a battle that would decide the fate of his world. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning earth. The screams of twisted monsters, and the desperate, defiant shouts of his friends. Chakra, raw and untamed, bled from the very soil, a torrent of power that he and Sasuke rode like a tidal wave against a goddess of impossible might. He could feel Kurama's rage mixing with his own determination, a roaring furnace in his soul. He could feel the cool, sharp focus of Sasuke beside him. A perfect and necessary counterpoint. They were two halves of a whole, poised to seal away the progenitor of all their pain. The next moment, there was only silence. A profound, deafening quiet that swallowed the roar of battle whole. Kagaya Otsutsuki, her face a mask of serene fury, had played her final, desperate hand. It wasn't an attack meant to kill, not directly. It was something worse. With a gesture that held no wasted motion, she didn't strike at him, but at the space around him. Reality, stretched taut by the sheer cosmic weight of their conflict, finally shredded. For an instant, Naruto saw everything. A kaleidoscope of worlds flashed before his eyes. Skies of burning crimson, oceans of liquid silver, cities that hung upside down from crystalline ceilings. He saw timelines branching and collapsing, infinite possibilities born and dying in the space of a heartbeat. It was a glimpse into the raw engine of creation, a sight no mortal mind was meant to witness. His six paths sage mode, a power that connected him to the very essence of nature, screamed in protest. It was like being plugged into 1,000 suns at once. Then, the tearing sensation. It wasn't physical pain. It was a deeper violation, a feeling of being unwritten. His connection to his world, to the soil of Konoha, to the faces of his comrades, to the very air he had breathed his entire life, was being severed. Thread by painful thread, he reached out, a hand slick with his own blood, grasping for something, for anything. He saw Sasuke's shocked, wide-eyed face, his arm outstretched, just inches away. He saw Sakura's horrified cry, a sound that never reached his ears. And then he was pulled through. The universe folded in on itself, and Naruto Uzumaki, the hero of the fourth great ninja war, was gone. The first thing he registered was the smell. It was sweet, cloyingly so, but clean. It smelled like petrichor after a lightning strike, but thicker, heavier, clinging to the back of his throat. It hummed in the air, an energy that made the fine hairs on his arms stand on end and his skin tingle. It was nothing like the natural energy he was used to drawing upon. This was different, foreign. He forced his eyes open. Dappled sunlight filtered through a thick canopy of emerald leaves, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. He was lying on a bed of soft moss that felt cool against his cheek. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. The only sounds were the chirping of unseen birds and the distant buzzing of insects. The sudden, jarring peace was more disorienting than the chaos it had replaced. Naruto pushed himself up slowly, his body aching with a weariness that went bone deep. He wasn't injured, not in the traditional sense. His tan and black jacket was torn, the red haori he'd worn over it in tatters, but the wounds he'd sustained in the battle were already gone, sealed by the potent healing abilities granted by his power. This was an exhaustion of the soul. He ran a hand through his spiky blonde hair, his mind struggling to catch up. He was alive. That was a start. He stood, his worn shinobi sandals sinking slightly into the soft ground. He took a steadying breath, letting his senses expand. The forest was vibrant, teeming with life, but it was all wrong. The trees were familiar yet subtly different. The birdsong was in a key he'd never heard, and the ever-present hum of that strange energy, Ethernano, though he didn't have a name for it yet, was a constant, low thrum against his senses. He closed his eyes and reached inward, searching for the familiar, comforting presence of his partners. Kurama, he sent out, a silent call into the vast space of his own mind. There was no immediate, Grumpy response. No rumbling growl telling him to shut up and focus. There was only a profound quiet. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through his chest. He pushed deeper, desperation giving his search an edge. He found them, all 9 of them, but they were dormant. Curled up like sleeping animals, their immense power muted, their consciousnesses withdrawn into a deep, protective hibernation. They were exhausted, drained by the dimensional transit, their connection to this new world's natural energy tenuous and unstable. He could feel their presence, a faint warmth in the back of his mind, but they were not with him. Not truly. For the first time since he was a lonely child on a swing set, Naruto Uzumaki was utterly, completely alone. The realization didn't make him want to scream or rage. He was long past that. It just settled in his chest like a lead weight. He was a general without an army, a leader without a people, a hero without a home. The purpose that had driven him his entire life, to be acknowledged, to protect his friends, to bring peace to his world, had been rendered meaningless. He had won the war, he assumed, but had lost the world it was fought for. He suppressed the wave of grief that threatened to overwhelm him. Now was not the time. Now was for survival. He was a shinobi, first and foremost. Analyze, adapt, overcome. With the fluid grace of a lifelong warrior, he leapt into the air, his feet finding purchase on a thick branch high in the canopy. He climbed, moving with silent efficiency until he broke through the leaves and could see the horizon. Before him, stretching out to the east, was the ocean, a vast expanse of shimmering blue under a brilliant sun. And nestled on the coast was a town. A port town, by the looks of it, with a large harbor filled with ships of strange and varied designs. Their sails were brightly colored, and some of them seemed to move without wind, a faint glow emanating from somewhere within their hulls. The architecture of the town was equally alien, a mix of stone and timber with whimsical, curved roofs and brightly painted facades that seemed more suited to a storybook than a real settlement. He had no idea where he was. This wasn't the land of fire. It wasn't any of the elemental nations. The feeling of utter dislocation intensified. He dropped back to the forest floor, landing without a sound. He needed information. He needed to understand the rules of this new place. He started walking towards the town, his movements quiet and deliberate, a ghost in the vibrant green. He was a stranger in a strange land. And a stranger who was too noticeable was a target. The port of Harem was a cacophony of life. The air smelled of salt, fish, tar, and that ever-present sweet energy, which was even stronger here, concentrated among the people. Fishermen shouted as they hauled in their nets, merchants hawked their wares from colorful stalls, and children darted through the crowded streets, their laughter echoing off the cobblestones. Naruto moved through it all like a wraith. His tattered clothes and the sheer intensity in his cerulean eyes drew more than a few curious glances, but he paid them no mind. He was a sponge, absorbing everything. He listened to the cadence of the language, the lilting tones and unfamiliar slang. It was miraculously, blessedly understandable, a small mercy in a sea of confusion. The words he kept hearing were magic, wizards, and guilds. People spoke of them with a casual familiarity, as if discussing the weather or the price of bread. A group of women gossiped excitedly about a magazine, Sorcerer Weekly, pointing at pictures of wizards who posed like celebrities. A burly man with a tattoo of a winged horse on his arm paid for a drink with a flick of his wrist. A small ball of light materializing in the vendor's hand as currency. Magic was real here, and it was common. This was a world fundamentally different from his own. In his world, chakra was a hidden river, a power wielded by a dedicated, often secretive military class. Here, magic seemed to be an open, flowing ocean that anyone could tap into. He found a small, out-of-the-way stall selling grilled fish on skewers. The gnawing emptiness in his stomach, a physical manifestation of his emotional state, was becoming impossible to ignore. He didn't have any of this world's currency, but the vendor was an old woman with kind eyes who, after one look at his weary face and torn clothes, simply pushed a skewer into his hand and waved off his attempt to find something to offer in trade. He ate slowly, deliberately, savoring the simple taste. It was the first thing that had felt real, tangible, since he'd woken up. As he ate, he watched a crowd gathering in the central plaza. There was a buzz of excitement, mostly from the younger women. At the center of it all was a man with garish purple hair, preening in a gaudy cape. "It's him. It's Salamander," a girl squealed. "He's a member of Fairy Tail." Another added breathlessly, "He's so dreamy." Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. The man, Bora he would later learn he was called, was exuding a type of energy, a spell, that felt greasy and manipulative. It was a low-level charm, designed to evoke feelings of affection and adoration. Pathetic, really. It wouldn't have worked on a genin fresh from the academy. Yet the women in the crowd were fawning, their eyes glazed over. His gaze drifted past the preening fake and landed on a young woman on the edge of the crowd. She had bright, blonde hair tied in a side ponytail and startlingly intelligent chocolate brown eyes. She, too, had a hard-eyed look on her face, but there was something else there. A flicker of resistance. A part of her mind was fighting the influence, a testament to a stronger will than those around her. She was drawn in, but she wasn't completely lost. Naruto finished his fish, his attention fixed on the scene. He had no interest in the man, but the subtle can flee. Caught within the blonde girl was a flicker of complexity in an otherwise straightforwardly foolish display. The noise of the fawning crowd was beginning to grate on his nerves, a shrill annoyance after the profound silence of his awakening. He decided he'd had enough. He started walking, his path taking him directly towards the crowd. He didn't push or shove, he simply moved. People seemed to part before him, their attention so fixed on the salamander that they barely registered the quiet, intense figure weaving through them. As he drew closer, the greasy charm magic washed over him. It was like being hit with a feather. It did nothing. His mind, fortified by years of mental training and the sheer force of his will, didn't even register it as an attack. He walked right past the blonde girl. As he did, his presence, a passive aura of immense, controlled power, seemed to create a wake, disrupting the weaker magic. The girl blinked, the hearts in her eyes vanishing as if a switch had been flipped. She looked down at herself, then back at the purple-haired man, a look of confusion and disgust dawning on her face. "Hey, you," Bora snapped, his performance interrupted by the boy who had just walked through his adoring fans as if they weren't there. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Naruto didn't even break stride. He just glanced over his shoulder, his blue eyes holding a flat, unimpressed calm. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The complete and utter lack of acknowledgement was more insulting than any retort. He just kept walking, leaving a fuming, sputtering charlatan and a very confused blonde girl in his wake. "Thank you so much for that. I was so embarrassed." Naruto was sitting at a small table in a cozy diner, a plate piled high with food in front of him. The blonde girl, whose name he now knew was Lucy, had chased him down, insisting on treating him to a meal as thanks for breaking the spell. She was a talker. She chattered on about the illegal charm spell, her own foolishness for almost falling for it, and her dream of joining a famous wizard guild. And the best one, the most amazing, chaotic, and wonderful guild in the entire kingdom of Fury, is Fairy Tail. They're so cool, they're super strong and they're always getting into trouble, but they're like a big family, you know. They always have each other's backs. That's where I want to go. Naruto listened, his focus split between her words and the mountain of food he was steadily demolishing. He ate with a purpose that bordered on reverence. A hot meal was a luxury he hadn't had in what felt like a lifetime. He wasn't shoveling it in like he might have in his youth, he was simply efficient. "You're not from around here, are you?" Lucy asked, finally pausing in her monologue to study him. He had said maybe 5 words since they sat down. He wasn't rude, just quiet. A deep, resonant quiet, like a still lake. He swallowed a mouthful of steak before answering. "No, I could tell," she said with a nod. "Your clothes, for one. And you have this intensity. Like you've seen a lot." She leaned forward, her chin resting in her palm. "So, what's your name? What kind of magic do you use? That thing you did back there. Just walking by, it was like you completely cancelled out his spell." He looked up from his plate, his blue eyes meeting hers. They were startlingly clear, like windows into a deep and ancient sky. They held a profound weariness that seemed at odds with his youthful face. "Naruto. And that wasn't magic." Lucy blinked. "It wasn't. Then what was it?" He considered how to answer. How could he explain chakra, the sage of 6 paths, the elemental nature of his world, to someone from this one? It was impossible. Just a personal skill, he said, the answer being both truthful and utterly evasive. She seemed to understand she wasn't going to get a straight answer and, to her credit, didn't push. Instead, her eyes sparkled with a different kind of curiosity. Naruto. A cool name. Are you a wizard, then? Looking to join a guild? I'm looking for a place to start, he admitted, the words feeling heavy. I'm lost. He didn't say it with self-pity. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the flat finality of a soldier reporting his position. The honesty of it caught Lucy off guard. She saw past the immense confidence he projected, past the quiet power, and glimpsed the lonely man beneath. Her expression softened. Well, she said, a genuine, warm smile spreading across her face. Like I said, I'm heading to Fairy Tale. It's a place for people who are a little lost. It's a home. You should come with me. A guy as strong as you would fit right in. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw no guile, no hidden motive. Just a pure, unadulterated kindness. A desire to help a stranger. It was a light, a small flicker in the vast, confusing darkness he found himself in. A guild, a family. The words resonated with a part of his soul he thought had been scoured clean by the war. Before he could answer, Bora's voice, amplified by magic, echoed from outside. Attention, people of Harem. I, Salamander of Fairy Tale, I'm having a little party on my yacht tonight. Everyone is invited. Lucy groaned, slumping onto the table. That guy just doesn't quit. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The man had claimed to be from Fairy Tale, the guild Lucy held in such high regard. He doubted it. Bullies and manipulators rarely belong to organizations built on family and trust. Something didn't add up. Later that evening, Lucy sat on a park bench, rereading an article about Fairy Tale for the dozenth time, her earlier encounter leaving a sour taste in her mouth. She'd been so sure that creep was her ticket in. I see you didn't go to the party. She looked up. Naruto was standing there, a silhouette against the setting sun. He moved so quietly she hadn't even heard him approach. No way, she scoffed. Turns out he's a creep who was just trying to lure girls onto his yacht to sell them. He's not even a member of Fairy Tale. He got kicked out a few years ago. I can't believe I almost fell for it. She sighed, dejected. Some wizard I am. He was using a tool, Naruto said. His voice even. It's not a weakness to be affected by it. Your strength was that you fought it. His simple words of validation warmed her more than she expected. Thanks, Naruto. She looked out at the harbor, where a gaudy yacht was bobbing on the waves, loud music pulsing from its deck. I hope the Magic Council catches him soon. Naruto was silent for a moment, his gaze also fixed on the ship. His senses, honed to a razor's edge, could feel the energy on that boat. He could feel the smug satisfaction of Bora, the fear of the few girls who had been foolish enough to go, and something else, a cloying, sleep-inducing spell being prepared. They're in trouble, he said, his tone shifting. The quiet weariness was replaced by a sharp, decisive focus. Lucy looked at him, confused. What? Who? The girls on that boat. He turned to her, his expression serious. He's not just throwing a party. The realization dawned on Lucy's face, her casual frustration turning to genuine alarm. You don't think he's a slaver, do you? The word hung in the air, ugly and cold. Naruto didn't answer. He just started walking towards the docks. Lucy, her heart pounding, scrambled to her feet and followed him. What are you going to do? Stop him, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. When they reached the edge of the water, Bora's goons were there, acting as guards. Sorry, the party's a private affair now, one of them sneered, stepping forward to block their path. Lucy tensed, reaching for the celestial spirit keys hanging at her belt. Let us through. Naruto held up a hand, a silent gesture for her to stand down. He looked at the goon, his face impassive. You have one chance to walk away. The goon laughed. Or what? You'll cry to your mommy. He threw a clumsy punch aimed at Naruto's face. What happened next was so fast, Lucy almost missed it. Naruto didn't dodge, not really. He shifted his weight, a barely perceptible movement. The punch slid past his head. His right hand came up, not in a fist, but with his fingers extended. He tapped the man's sternum with 2 fingers. It looked like a gentle poke. The goon's eyes went wide. He gasped, a strangled sound, and then crumpled to the ground, unconscious before he hit the cobblestones. Not beaten, not broken. Switched off. The other thugs stared in shock. One of them, panicking, thrust his hands forward. Fire bullet. A small orb of orange flame shot towards Naruto. Lucy cried out, "Naruto, look out." He didn't even look at the spell. He just swiped his hand through the air. A casual gesture like brushing away a fly. The fireball dissipated into nothing, its magic completely unraveled by the minuscule, precise burst of chakra he'd released. Silence. The remaining goons stared, their jaws hanging open. This wasn't magic they recognized. He hadn't cast a counter spell. He had just erased it. Naruto took a single step forward. The sound of his sandal on the stone was like a thunderclap in the sudden quiet. That was all it took. The thugs scrambled over each other in their haste to get away, fleeing into the night. Lucy stared at him, her mind reeling. The sheer, effortless economy of his actions was terrifying. There was no wasted movement, no flashy display. Just perfect, absolute control. This wasn't just strength. This was mastery. How? She breathed. "Stay here," he said. His voice calm but brooking no argument. He turned his attention to the yacht, 100 feet out in the water. And then he ran. He ran across the surface of the water, his feet kicking up small sprays as if on solid ground. He reached the yacht in seconds, vaulting over the railing and landing silently on the deck. On board, Bora was putting the finishing touches on his plan, a magical circle glowing on the floor. Designed to put all the girls into a deep sleep. Almost time to set sail for Bosco. He chortled. "I don't think so." Bora spun around. Naruto was standing there, his hands in his pockets. His expression one of mild disappointment. "You," Bora snarled, recognizing him from the plaza. "How did you get on my ship?" "No matter. You're just in time to be packaged up with the rest of them." He thrust his hands forward. Prominence Typhoon. A massive torrent of purple fire erupted from his hands, swirling into a vortex and roaring towards Naruto. It was his strongest spell. A wall of incinerating heat that filled the entire deck. The captive girls screamed in terror. Naruto didn't move. He didn't raise a shield or prepare a counterattack. He just stood there as the inferno washed over him. And parted. The flames flowed around him as if he were a rock in a river, not a single spark touching his clothes. He stood in the eye of the storm, completely unharmed, his expression unchanged. The sheer force of his will, passively reinforced with a thin layer of chakra, was enough to repel the magic. Bora's eyes bulged in disbelief. "Impossible. Who? What are you?" Naruto walked forward, stepping out of the raging fire as it died down, its caster too stunned to maintain it. "I'm the guy who's telling you your party is over." Panic took over. Bora blasted the deck with another spell, trying to propel the yacht away from the docks and out to sea. But as he did, a massive wave rose from the harbor, summoned by a golden key. "Open, gate of the water bearer." Aquarius. Lucy had ignored his instruction, determined to help. The wave slammed into the yacht, sending it careening back towards the port, where it crashed violently into the docks, splintering wood and sending cargo flying. Naruto, unshaken by the impact, turned his attention back to Bora, who had been thrown against the far railing. He saw a flash of movement from the corner of his eye. A shape hurtling through the air, wreathed in fire. "I'm all fired up now." A voice roared. A young man with pink hair and a scaly scarf landed on the ruined deck, grinning like a maniac. He took one look at Bora and his grin widened. "So you're the guy pretending to be from Fairy Tail, huh? I'm gonna turn you to ash." It was Natsu Dragneel. Before Natsu could launch his attack, Naruto was already moving. He appeared in front of the pink-haired wizard, a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. "He's not worth the effort." Natsu looked at him, confused. "Hey, who are you? Get out of my way." Naruto ignored him. His gaze was locked on Bora. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. Bora, scrambling to his feet, tried to summon one last burst of fire. Naruto was simply there, in front of him. His hand rested on Bora's shoulder. It wasn't a grab, just a touch. But through that single point of contact, Bora felt it. An ocean of power. A pressure so immense it felt like the sky was collapsing on him. It was a silent, terrifying promise of annihilation. This man wasn't just going to beat him. He could unmake him. You claim to be a member of a guild that values family, Naruto said, his voice quiet, yet carrying over the sound of the crashing waves. You used that name to prey on people. You are a disgrace to whatever ideals they hold. He applied the slightest pressure. Bora's knees buckled. Leave, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was more menacing than any shout. And never use that name again. He released his grip. Bora scrambled backwards, falling over himself, his face a mask of pure terror. He didn't need to be told twice. He and the remnants of his crew who were still on the boat fled, disappearing into the ruined port. Natsu stared, his fists still clenched. He'd been ready for a huge, destructive fight, but this stranger had ended it with a touch and a few words. It was anticlimactic and incredibly impressive. Naruto turned, his gaze falling on Lucy, who was now standing on the shore, her water spirit, Aquarius, having vanished. He walked to the edge of the shattered yacht and leapt gracefully to the dock, landing beside her. "Are you all right?" Yes, she stammered, still processing the raw, controlled power she had just witnessed. "You were incredible." Suddenly, the ground shook. Knights from the Magic Council's army began to pour into the port. Alerted by the commotion. "Crap, the army. We gotta run," Natsu yelled, grabbing Lucy's hand. He glanced at Naruto. "You too, quiet guy. Let's go." Before Naruto could react, Natsu was dragging both him and Lucy through the streets of Harem, away from the authorities, a wide, triumphant grin on his face. "By the way," Natsu shouted over his shoulder as they ran. "You said you wanted to join Fairy Tail, right, Lucy? Then let's go." Lucy's face lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. "Really? You'll take me?" Naruto found himself being pulled along, a silent participant in their chaotic escape. He looked at Lucy's beaming face, at Natsu's infectious, reckless energy. For the first time all day, the lead weight in his chest felt a fraction lighter. He was still lost, still alone in a world that wasn't his. But he was moving forward. And for now, he was moving towards a place called Fairy Tail. As they fled the town, leaving the chaos behind, none of them noticed the S.K.Y. above Harem shimmer for a fraction of a second, like heat haze on a summer day. It was a distortion too subtle for any wizard's senses, too brief for any eye to catch. But in the silent, starless void between the folds of reality, an ancient and implacable consciousness stirred from its eons-long vigil. It had felt a tremor. A single, dissonant note had been struck in the grand, silent symphony of existence. A string had been plucked that should not have been there. It was a tiny, insignificant event. A wrongness. The consciousness noted its location, filed it away, and returned to its silent watch. The hunt had not yet begun. But a scent had been caught on the cosmic winds. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Home for the Fox. The journey from Harem to Magnolia was, for Lucy, an exercise in surrealism. On one side, she had Natsu Dragneel, a living, breathing legend from her favorite guild, chattering excitedly about fights, food, and the trouble they were going to get into. On the other, she had Naruto, a man who moved with the silence of a falling shadow and carried an aura of such profound power that it felt like walking next to a dormant volcano. Natsu, true to form, had insisted they take a carriage. He had also, true to form, immediately regretted it, his face turning a sickly shade of green the moment the wheels began to turn. He was slumped against the far window, groaning, his motion sickness rendering the mighty salamander completely inert. "I don't get it," Lucy mused, glancing from the miserable Natsu to the perfectly still Naruto. "How are you not affected? Carriages, ships, nothing seems to bother you." Naruto was gazing out the window, his eyes not focused on the passing scenery but on something much farther away. He seemed to be perpetually looking at a horizon only he could see. "I learned to balance my energy a long time ago," he answered, his voice a low rumble that was felt as much as heard. "It helps to keep your feet under you, no matter what you're standing on." It was another one of his non-answers, a simple statement that hinted at a universe of experience. Lucy was learning that conversations with him were like trying to scoop water from a deep well with her bare hands. She only ever got a handful, but she could feel the immense, cool depth below. So, she tried again, determined to bridge the quiet gap. Natsu says he's taking me to join Fairy Tail. What about you, Naruto? You coming? He finally turned his gaze from the window to her. His blue eyes were so clear they seemed to hold no artifice. You said it was a place for people who are a little lost, he said. Repeating her own words back to her. That sounds like a good place to start. A thrill went through her. The idea of bringing a wizard as powerful as Natsu to the guild was a dream come true. But bringing Naruto, that felt different. It felt important. You'll love it, she beamed, her earlier anxieties forgotten. It's loud, and they break a lot of stuff, and everyone fights all the time. But, it's home. You can feel it the moment you walk in. Naruto offered a small, ghost of a smile. It was the first one she had seen, and it transformed his weary, intense face. Hinting at the younger man who might exist beneath the soldier's facade. I know the type. The rest of the journey passed in a strange, comfortable quiet, punctuated only by Natsu's pained groans. When the carriage finally rolled to a stop in the bustling city of Magnolia, Natsu burst from the door, kissing the solid ground with religious fervor. Freedom, sweet, unmoving land, he roared, before leaping to his feet. All traces of sickness gone. All right, let's go. The guild's just up this way. He led them through the streets of a town that felt more alive and more magical than even Harem. The architecture was a beautiful, eclectic mix, and the scent of ethernano was thick and vibrant. And then she saw it. A massive, sprawling building with whimsical spires and a banner proudly displaying a unique, stylized sigil. The Fairy Tail Guild Hall. Lucy's heart hammered in her chest. This was it, the culmination of her dreams. Natsu kicked the massive double doors open with a triumphant shout. We're back. The sound that erupted from within was not a welcoming cheer. It was the sound of chaos incarnate. A chair flew past Natsu's head, smashing against the far wall. How? Naked man with dark blue hair was shouting at a man in an orange flame-patterned shirt. A woman in a barrel was drinking from a massive mug of ale. Someone was thrown through a table, which splintered with a satisfying crash. The air smelled of booze, sweat, and something that smelled distinctly like singed hair. Lucy stood frozen in the doorway, her idealistic image of the guild clashing violently with the riotous reality. Wow, it's exactly like the article said. Natsu just grinned. See, told ya. Now, who wants to fight me? Naruto stepped past Lucy, moving from the bright sunlight into the dim, rowdy hall. He didn't look shocked or intimidated. He looked faintly amused. A nostalgic glimmer shone in his eyes. The shouting, the casual violence, the underlying sense of camaraderie beneath it all, it wasn't just familiar. It was a toned-down version of the life he'd always known. It was like coming home to a house he'd never seen before. His presence, however, did not go unnoticed. The moment he stepped inside, a hush began to fall. It started near the door and spread inwards like a ripple in a pond. The brawlers paused mid-swing. The drinkers lowered their mugs. All eyes turned to the stranger. It wasn't just his tattered clothes or the handsome, weary face. It was his stillness. In a room defined by frantic motion, his quiet immobility was an anomaly. He stood there, hands in his pockets. A pillar of calm in a sea of chaos. Natsu, mistaking the silence for reverence of his own return, puffed out his chest. Yeah, that's right, I'm back, and I brought a new member, he announced, gesturing to a star-struck Lucy. But no one was looking at Lucy. They were all looking at Naruto. A big, burly man with white hair and prominent lips stepped forward. A real man doesn't stare, he introduces himself. Elfman Strauss boomed. Who are you, stranger? Before Naruto could answer, Natsu was in his face, a fiery grin splitting his features. Never mind that, I saw what you did back in Harem. You're strong, aren't you? Fight me. Natsu didn't wait for an answer. His fist, wreathed in roaring flames, shot towards Naruto's face. Lucy screamed. The guild members whooped, the tension broken. Ready for a good show. Naruto didn't even flinch. He simply tilted his head to the side. Natsu's fist flew past his ear, the heat washing over his cheek. as Natsu's momentum carried him forward. Naruto's left hand came out of his pocket. He didn't punch. He didn't chop. He gently cupped the back of Natsu's head, and with his right hand, he tapped Natsu's outstretched elbow. It was a simple, fluid motion. The tap diverted the force of Natsu's own punch, sending him spinning off balance. The hand on his head guided him, ensuring he didn't crash into a wall but instead stumbled into an empty table. Landing in a heap, confused but unharmed. Hey, no fair. Natsu scrambled up, fire already gathering in his mouth for a roar. Ice make. Lance. A volley of sharp, ice lances shot towards Naruto from the side. Gray Fullbuster, now stripped to his boxers for some reason, had decided to join the fray. Naruto didn't turn, he just took a single, casual step to his left. The lances embedded themselves in the floorboards where he had been standing a second before. As he moved, his right hand came out of his pocket. He flicked his middle finger, sending a small, compressed pellet of air at the new ice formations. It wasn't a jutsu, just a simple application of chakra. The pellet struck the base of the ice lances, and the resulting vibration, perfectly tuned, shattered the entire construct into a fine, glittering powder. Gray stared, dumbfounded. He broke my ice, without even touching it. A real man fights with his fists. Elfman bellowed, his arm transforming into a thick, scaly beast soul appendage. He charged, a human battering ram intent on plowing Naruto through the wall. Naruto finally turned to face the new threat. He watched the massive man charge, his expression unchanging. At the last possible second, as Elfman's fist was inches from his chest, Naruto dropped. He didn't duck or dodge. He simply bent his knees, his center of gravity lowering instantly. Elfman's charge carried him right over Naruto's head. As Elfman flew over him, Naruto stood back up. His hand shot out and tapped the sole of Elfman's airborne boot. Again, it wasn't a strike. It was a nudge, but it was a perfectly placed nudge that sent Elfman's trajectory spiraling, landing him directly on top of Natsu, who had just managed to get to his feet. The two crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs and groans. The guild was dead silent. The entire fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. The stranger hadn't thrown a single punch. He hadn't cast a single spell. He had just moved. He'd used his opponent's own strength and momentum against them with an efficiency that was borderline insulting. He hadn't fought them. He had managed them. From the back of the room, a sultry voice chuckled. Well, now, this is a first. A beautiful woman with long white hair and a stunning figure walked forward. It was Mirajan Strauss, the guild's sweet-hearted barmaid and poster girl. Her blue eyes, however, held a shrewd intelligence that missed nothing. It's not every day someone takes down Natsu, Gray, and Elfman without breaking a sweat. He didn't take us down. Natsu protested, struggling out from under Elfman. He was just moving weird. He's good, a stern voice said. A tall woman in full armor, with brilliant scarlet hair, stepped into the light. Urza Scarlet. Her sharp, brown eyes assessed Naruto with a warrior's appraisal. She hadn't seen a fight. She had seen a demonstration of absolute mastery over motion and balance. Very good. Naruto finally spoke, his voice calm and even, cutting through the tension. They were eager. I didn't want to break your furniture. He gestured vaguely at the already wrecked room, a hint of dry humor in his tone. A hearty laugh boomed from the second floor railing. Ha ha ha, worried about our furniture. I like this one. A tiny, elderly man stood on the railing, looking down at them all. Despite his size, he commanded an immediate and absolute respect. Makarov Dreyar, the master of fairy tale. He hopped down, landing lightly on the floor. He walked right up to Naruto, craning his neck to look up at the tall blonde. The guild held its breath. Makarov's eyes, old and wise, studied Naruto. He wasn't just looking at the man. He was sensing. And what he sensed made his heart skip a beat. The Ethernano in the air, the very magic of the world, seemed to bend around this man, reluctant to get too close. Within him, Makarov felt an ocean. A bottomless, silent sea of power so vast and so alien that it defied comprehension. It wasn't magic as he knew it. It was something else, something primal. But within that terrifying ocean of power, he sensed something else. There was no malice, no ambition, No greed. There was just a profound stillness, and a deep, aching loneliness. You are not from around here, are you, my boy? Makarov asked, his voice quiet. Naruto met the old man's gaze. For the first time, he felt like someone was seeing him. Not just his power. No, sir, I'm not. And you wish to join our little family. I'm looking for a place to belong. The words were simple, honest, and heavy with unspoken history. Makarov's expression softened. He had taken in many lost and broken children over the years. This one was older, and infinitely more powerful, but he recognized the same lost look in his eyes. Quote, "Power without a purpose can be a heavy burden," Makarov said, his voice full of understanding. But a family gives it meaning. It gives it a home. He smiled, a wide, genuine grin. Mirajan, get the stamp. We've got a new member. A cheer erupted through the guild, 10 times louder than before. The earlier tension was forgotten, replaced by a raucous welcome. Natsu, all previous animosity gone, slung an arm around Naruto's shoulders. All right, another strong guy. We gotta have a real fight later. No more of that dancy stuff. Mirajan approached with the guild stamp, her smile warm and genuine. Welcome to Fairy Tail. Where would you like it? Naruto looked at the stamp, then at the cheering, brawling, laughing people around him. He thought of the lonely boy on the swing, the outcast who would have given anything for a single person to welcome him. He pulled up the sleeve of his tattered jacket, revealing his left shoulder. Here is fine, he said. Mirajan pressed the stamp against his skin. A black fairy tail mark appeared, stark against his sun-kissed skin. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he was marked as belonging somewhere. A strange warmth spread through his chest. A feeling he hadn't realized he'd been so desperately missing. He was a member of Fairy Tail. 1,000 jewel just to chase off some bandits. That's barely enough to cover this month's rent. Lucy complained, looking at the request form pinned to the board. 2 days had passed. 2 days of Naruto quietly observing the guild's inner workings, of fielding and deflecting Natsu's constant challenges, and of politely turning down Kana's invitations to drinking contests. He had spoken little, but he watched everything. It's a simple job, Naruto said, coming up behind her. He'd traded his tattered war clothes for a simple black shirt and dark pants, courtesy of the guild's small store. The new clothes were plain, but on his frame, they looked sharp and practical. Simple is a good place to start. But it's boring, Lucy whined. I want a big adventure. Treasure hunting. Fighting giant monsters. You want to pay your rent, he corrected gently. First things first. Lucy pouted but knew he was right. Fine, but you're helping me. You owe me for getting you into the best guild in Fury. Fair enough, he agreed with a slight nod. The mission was exactly as boring as Lucy had feared. The bandits were a handful of thugs who had been extorting a small farming village north of Magnolia. They arrived in the late afternoon. The leader of the bandits, a large man with more confidence than sense, saw them coming. Well, Fairy Tail sends a pretty little girl and her quiet boyfriend, the bandit jeered. Give us all your valuables and we'll let you run back home. Lucy squared her shoulders, reaching for her keys. I'll have you know I'm a celestial wizard. Naruto held up a hand. I'll handle this. He walked forward, his pace unhurried. The bandits laughed. One of them charged, swinging a rusty sword. Naruto caught the blade between his thumb and forefinger. The bandit's eyes widened. He tried to pull his sword back, but it was held fast, clamped in a grip of impossible strength. Naruto twisted his wrist. With a screech of protesting metal, the sword bent into a pretzel. He then flicked his fingers, sending the ruined weapon flying. He didn't stop moving. He flowed through the rest of the bandits like water. A palm heel strike to a chest that sent a man flying back 10 feet to land in a heap. A simple leg sweep that took another off his feet. He deflected a club with the back of his hand, using the man's own momentum to spin him into one of his comrades. It was over in seconds. The bandits were all on the ground, groaning, more shocked and confused than seriously injured. The village mayor, who had been watching from a safe distance, ran up, his face full of gratitude. Thank you. You saved our village. As the villagers cheered N.D. offered them food and lodging for the night, Lucy just stared at Naruto. It was the same as in the guild. No wasted energy, no flash, just a quiet, terrifying competence. That evening, they sat by a crackling fire in the center of the village. The villagers had thrown a small festival in their honor. The air was filled with music and laughter. Lucy and Naruto sat slightly apart from the main celebration, enjoying the warmth of the flames. "You never told me," Lucy said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Where are you from, really?" Naruto stared into the fire, the dancing flames reflecting in his deep blue eyes. "A place that was always at war," he said, his voice low. "I spent my whole life fighting. To be acknowledged, to protect my friends, to stop a cycle of hatred that seemed like it would never end." He wasn't looking at her, but he was opening up more than he had before. Lucy listened, captivated. "I know what it feels like to be an outcast," he continued. "To have everyone look at you like you're a monster. And I know what it feels like to watch your home be turned to rubble." His mind flashed to Paine's assault on Konoha, the dust, the screams, the feeling of utter helplessness. "The only thing that ever got me through was my bonds with the people I cared about. My friends, my team, they were my family." Lucy's heart ached for him. She thought of her own lonely childhood in the Heartfilia mansion. Her cold, distant father, the suffocating silence after her mother died. I think I understand a little," she said softly. "After my mom passed away, my father just buried himself in his work. I was alone in that big house. The only friends I had were the spirits my mom left me. That's why I ran away. I wanted to find a place where I wasn't alone. I wanted to find a family. That's why I wanted to join Fairy Tail so badly." Naruto finally turned to look at her. He saw the flicker of old pain in her chocolate brown eyes, the same yearning for connection that had defined his own youth. He saw her ambition, her kindness, her unwavering spirit. In a world that was utterly alien to him, here was a feeling he understood completely. A genuine, unforced connection sparked between them, forged in the shared fire of lonely pasts and the search for belonging. He saw her spirit. She saw the man behind the legend he was becoming. "You found it," he said, his voice soft. "Fairy Tail. It's a good place." "We found it," she corrected, a warm, bright smile on her face. They sat in silence for a long moment, the crackling of the fire and the distant music filling the space between them. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was a shared one. An understanding had passed between them that went deeper than words. Later that night, back in the room the mayor had given him, Naruto couldn't sleep. The unfamiliar world, the new bonds, the ghost of his old life, it all churned within him. He stood by the open window, looking up at the two moons that hung in the foreign sky. He was reaching inward, checking on the Biju. They were still quiet, but their energy was slowly, steadily recovering, acclimating to the Ethernano-rich environment. He could feel Kurama beginning to stir, his vast consciousness slowly unfurling from its deep rest. Suddenly, a sensation shot through him, colder and sharper than any ice magic. It was a feeling of being seen. Not with eyes. It was a piercing, analytical gaze from an impossible distance. It felt like a pinprick on his very soul, a cold, calculating awareness that was utterly devoid of emotion. It was an abstract pressure, feeling of a predator's gaze from a dimension away. He tensed, his entire body going rigid. His senses, expanded by sage mode, flared out, trying to find the source. But there was nothing. It wasn't in the village, not in the country, not even on the planet. It was everywhere and nowhere at once. "Kit," a deep, rumbling voice echoed in the back of his mind. It was faint, groggy, but unmistakable. "Kurama, Kurama, are you all right?" Naruto projected back, relief washing over him. "I'm fine. But, what was that?" The fox grumbled, his mental voice growing stronger. "That feeling. You felt it too." "Of course I felt it. It's like..." Kurama paused, searching for the right words. The sensation was fading now, but the memory of it was chilling. "It's not of this world. It feels like the Otsutsuki's emptiness. That void-like quality they have, but older. Colder. More absolute." Naruto stood by the window, his hand unconsciously resting on the black fairy tail mark on his shoulder. He had found a new home, a new friend, a glimmer of a new purpose. But something had found him, too. Something from the darkness between the worlds. And he knew, with a warrior's certainty, that it was hunting him. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Moon Drip's Shadow. The return from the farming village was far more subdued. Lucy had her rent money, a fact she celebrated with a cheer that echoed across the plains, but the quiet conversation she'd shared with Naruto by the fire had left a thoughtful silence between them. She found herself watching him more, trying to piece together the fragments of the man he'd revealed. A warrior from a world of endless conflict, a lonely soul searching for a home. It was the stuff of epic tales, yet he wore his history not like a badge of honor, but like a well-worn coat, familiar and heavy. They walked back into the fairy tale guild hall to the familiar sounds of cheerful mayhem. This time, however, Naruto's entrance didn't cause a stir. He was one of them now. Kana raised her beer barrel in a sloshed salute. Gray, fully clothed for a change, gave him a curt nod of acknowledgement. Even Elfman grunted a manly return as he passed. Naruto felt the subtle shift. He was no longer just a visitor. He was part of the background noise, and in a place like this, that was the highest form of acceptance. He found a quiet corner table, content to simply sit and observe, a silent guardian watching over his new chaotic family. Lucy, meanwhile, proudly posted their completed request form on the board, beaming. See, rent paid, and nobody got thrown through a mountain. I call that a successful mission. That sounds boring. Natsu's voice cut in. He zipped over to the board, a piece of paper clutched in his hand. He had a wild, conspiratorial glint in his eyes that usually preceded property damage. Look at this. I found us a real job. He slammed the paper onto the request board. It was a faded, important-looking flyer with a prominent S stamped at the top. The mood in the hall shifted instantly. A hush fell, far more serious than the one Naruto's arrival had first caused. Natsu, you idiot, Mikao yelled from a few tables over. That's an S-class quest. You know we're not allowed to take those. Wakaba added, puffing nervously on his pipe. Lucy's face went pale. S-class. Natsu, you can't be serious. Only S-class wizards like Urza, Miragen, or Laxus can take those. We'll be kicked out of the guild. Relax. Natsu grinned, completely unconcerned. The reward is huge. 7 million jewel. Plus, it sounds like fun. We've gotta go to some cursed island called Galuna and break a curse. Easy. Naruto's eyes drifted to the flyer. He didn't know the specifics of their guild's ranking system, but he understood hierarchy and the reasons for it. This was a clear breach of protocol. Yet, as he watched Natsu practically vibrate with excitement, he saw the same reckless determination that had once led him to chase after Sasuke, to challenge the cage, to defy the entire world for the sake of a friend. It was foolish, yes. But it was also pure. We are not going, Lucy said, her voice firm, planting her hands on her hips. Too late. I already told the client we would. Natsu declared, happy. Quote, sir. The blue exceed popped up, grabbing a protesting Natsu and flying towards the door. Get back here, you flame-brained moron. Lucy shrieked, chasing after them. The guild erupted into chaos as members tried and failed to stop the determined duo. Naruto remained at his table, a thoughtful expression on his face. Miragen walked over, a gentle, worried smile on her lips. You're not going to try and stop them? She asked, her voice soft. Would it work? Naruto countered, his gaze fixed on the doorway through which they had disappeared. Miragen sighed. No, probably not. Then it's better if someone goes with them to make sure they don't get themselves killed. He stood up, his movements fluid and decisive. He wasn't asking for permission. He was stating his intent. He looked at Miragen, and for a moment, she saw the general he must have been. The weary leader who understood that sometimes the only way to manage reckless soldiers was to lead them from the front. Be careful, Naruto, she said, her concern genuine. S-class quests are dangerous for a reason. I will, he promised, before turning and walking out the door, his long strides easily eating up the distance. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. He knew exactly where they were going. He found them at the Harem train station, arguing. Or rather, Lucy was arguing. While Natsu tried to discreetly inch away from the train, his face already looking a little pale. There you are, Lucy cried, relieved when she saw Naruto approaching. Tell him he's an idiot. He's an idiot, Naruto said flatly. Looking at Natsu. Natsu stuck his tongue out. Naruto then turned back to Lucy. But we're going with him. Lucy's jaw dropped. What? You too? But the rules. Master Makarov will have our heads. The client was promised help, Naruto said, his logic simple and unassailable. And he is too stubborn to stop. The mission will be completed. It's better that we are there to ensure it's done correctly. He looked past them, towards the docks. And we're not taking a train. Or a carriage. A short boat ride later, with Natsu once again rendered useless by his motion CKNESS, they arrived at the coast nearest to Galuna Island. The boatman, a grizzled old sailor, refused to take them any farther. The cursed island. No, sir, he said, shaking his head, his face grim. That place is bad juju. The moon, it's always purple over that island. Anyone who sets foot there gets turned into a demon. That's what the curse does. A purple moon. Sounds awesome. Natsu cheered, having recovered the second his feet touched the sand. It sounds terrifying, Lucy muttered, clutching her celestial keys like a lifeline. Naruto said nothing. He just stared out across the water at the island shrouded in mist. Even from this distance, his senses were screaming. The natural energy here was warped, twisted into a shape that felt fundamentally wrong. It was a subtle corruption. Like a single sour note in a beautiful symphony, but his sage abilities made him acutely sensitive to it. The air felt sick. Let's go, he said, already starting to walk towards the water. Naruto. The island is out there, Lucy said, pointing at the ocean. We don't have a boat anymore. Naruto just glanced over his shoulder. He gathered a small, precise amount of chakra at the soles of his feet and took a step onto the surface of the water. It held him perfectly. He took another, and then another, walking away from the shore as if it were solid ground. Lucy and Natsu stared, their mouths hanging open. Happy, who had been about to offer to fly them one at a time, just hovered in place, his fish forgotten. He's walking on water, Lucy breathed in disbelief. Whoa, that's a cool trick, Natsu yelled. Teach me how to do that. Naruto just beckoned for them to follow. Natsu, never one to back down from a challenge, tried to copy him, charging at the water's surface and immediately sinking with a great splash. After a few more failed, sputtering attempts, he finally gave up and let Happy carry him. Naruto, with a sigh that was becoming increasingly familiar, simply turned back, walked to Lucy, and scooped her up into his arms with no effort at all. Hey, she yelped, her face flushing a brilliant crimson as he held her bridal style. She was lighter than he expected. It's faster this way, he stated, his voice devoid of any romantic undertone. It was pure practicality. He then turned and began his walk across the sea, carrying a blushing, speechless Lucy, with a damp Natsu and a giggling Happy flying alongside. As they drew closer to the island, the feeling of wrongness intensified. Looking up, Naruto could see what the boatman meant. A massive, eerie purple moon hung in the sky directly above the island, even though it was the middle of the day. It wasn't a reflection or an illusion. It felt like a solid, malevolent presence, leaking that corrupt energy down onto the land below. He frowned. That's not a moon. Sure looks like one, Natsu said, squinting at it. No, Naruto clarified, his sage senses analyzing the phenomenon. It's a lens. All of that sick energy is being focused by it. It's a spell, a massive one. They arrived on a sandy beach to find a group of desperate-looking villagers waiting for them. Their leader, a man named Mocha, was a hulking figure with a strange, demonic-looking right arm. He explained the curse. The purple moon's light slowly transformed them, and the only way to save themselves was to destroy the moon. But that's impossible, Lucy exclaimed. You can't just destroy the moon. That's what the request is for, Mocha insisted. Only powerful wizards have a chance. While Lucy and Natsu spoke with the chief, Naru, to walk to the edge of the jungle that bordered the beach. He placed a hand on the trunk of a gnarled tree, closing his eyes. He let his senses sink into the very lifeblood of the island, the trees, the soil, the insects. The corruption was everywhere. It was a slow-acting poison, seeping into everything, twisting life into a grotesque parody of itself. And it was all emanating from a single point deep within the island's interior. A temple. The problem isn't the moon, Naruto said, turning back to the group. His voice was grim, cutting through their conversation. The moon is a symptom. The disease is on this island. What do you mean? Mocha asked, confused. Someone is casting a spell. A ritual, Naruto explained. It's called moon drip. It gathers moonlight and turns it into a destructive energy. But this is different. It's being filtered, changed. It's what's causing your curse. To stop it, we need to stop the casters. Natsu's eyes lit up. Casters. You mean there are bad guys to beat up? All right, let's go. He dashed off into the jungle before anyone could stop him. Natsu, wait, Lucy yelled, running after him with happy. Naruto looked at Mocha. Where is the source of the energy? A temple. Mocha nodded, pointing a hesitant, clawed finger. Up on the mountain. But it is a sacred place. Not anymore, Naruto said, before disappearing into the trees, moving with a speed that left the villagers staring at empty air. He moved through the jungle not like a man, but like a whisper. His senses were his guide, leading him unerringly towards the epicenter of the island's corruption. While he knew Natsu and Lucy were heading in the same general direction, their path was loud and direct. His was silent and strategic. He was a shinobi on a reconnaissance mission. He needed to understand the battlefield before the battle began. He arrived at the temple long before the others. It was an ancient, crumbling ruin, but the air around it was thick with the foul energy of the moon drip. At the center of the ruins, a massive column of purple light shot up into the sky, connecting with the moon above. Huddled around the base of the light were robed figures, chanting in a low monotone. But that wasn't what held his attention. Beneath the temple, deep underground, his senses detected something else. A presence. It was vast, dormant, and filled with a cold primordia. Malice that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was a power signature not unlike the Biju, but twisted, demonic, and utterly devoid of life. It felt like a monument to death. Moon drip ritual wasn't just happening above it. The purple energy was seeping into the ground, being drawn towards the dormant entity like iron filings to a magnet. They're not just melting something, he realized, his mind racing. The demon below, its energy signature, they're using it as an anchor. A beacon. This ritual isn't just about destruction. It's about resonance. It's designed to call something. To draw in a power that shares the same malevolent frequency as the demon. This was far more dangerous than a simple curse. His thoughts were interrupted by a sound from behind him. You're not from around here. You have the scent of an outsider. Naruto turned. A man in a strange mask and a top hat stood there, flanked by a man with ridiculously thick eyebrows and another who spoke only in palindromes. Yuka Suzuki, the man with the eyebrows said, his hands glowing with a strange energy. My anti-magic wave nullifies all magic. You're out of luck, wizard. Naruto just looked at him, his expression unreadable. I told your friend in Harem, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. That wasn't magic. Yuka lunged, thrusting his hands forward. Wave. He never finished the word. Naruto vanished. He reappeared behind Yuka, his hand chopped down in a single, precise arc. He didn't hit Yuka's neck or head. He struck the back of his knee. The nerve strike sent a jolt up Yuka's leg, causing it to buckle instantly. As Yuka fell, Naruto spun, his other hand open-palmed, and gently pushed the center of Yuka's back. The small push, combined with his forward momentum, sent the man tumbling head over heels to land in an unconscious heap 20 feet away. Toby, the dog-like man, shouted, Mega Jelly Jiggle Claws, and lunged, his nails hardening. Naruto didn't even look at him. He raised a hand and a ball of compressed wind, no bigger than a marble, shot out and hit Toby squarely in the stomach. It wasn't a Rasengan. It was just focused air. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he crumpled to the ground. Gasping like a fish, the masked man, Sherry's loyal rat, Angelica, watched in stunned silence as his two companions were dispatched in under 3 seconds with non-lethal, contemptuous ease. Naruto turned his full attention to the last one standing. Tell your master, he said, his voice cold, to stop this ritual now. He is playing with forces he does not understand. The rat-like creature squeaked in terror and scurried away, back towards the temple. Naruto let it go. It was a message, and a warning. He heard a crash from the other side of the ruins. Natsu had arrived. Time for reconnaissance was over. He found Natsu locked in a battle with a masked man who controlled sleep magic, while Lucy struggled against a woman named Sherry who could control non-human entities. He watched for a moment, assessing. Natsu was immune to the sleep magic because it was fire-based, a lucky break. But Lucy was in trouble, her powerful spirit Aquarius rendered useless on dry land, and her new spirit Horologium, being controlled by Sherry. Naruto acted. He blurred past the fight, appearing next to the large clock spirit. He placed a hand on its wooden frame. He channeled a tiny, precise sliver of his own chakra into it, not to control it, but to disrupt Sherry's magic. The chakra acted like static, severing her connection. My puppet, what did you do? Sherry shrieked as Horologium froze. Then vanished back to the celestial spirit world. He then turned his attention to the sleep mage. The man saw him coming and blasted a torrent of purple gas at him. Naruto simply inhaled. He held it for a second, then exhaled a perfectly clean stream of air. His internal chakra control had neutralized the poison completely. My turn, Naruto said. He flickered forward, and with two precise finger pokes to the man's shoulders, disabled the nerve clusters that controlled his arms. The man dropped, his primary weapon taken from him without a single drop of blood shed. Hey, I had that, Natsu complained, pouting. You were taking too long, Naruto replied, already turning his attention to the central chamber where Gray had just burst in, coming face to face with a white-haired young man who looked remarkably like him. Leon Vascha. The reunion was cold and bitter. As Gray and Leon began their fated battle, a clash of two opposing ice-make philosophies, Naruto stepped back. This was Gray's fight. His role was to handle the externalities. The ground began to shake. The moon drip ritual was intensifying. The entire temple was tilting, sliding down the mountain. The village, Lucy cried, realizing what was happening. The ruins are going to crush the village. Suddenly, a new voice, sharp and authoritative as a whip crack, cut through the chaos. That's enough. Urza Scarlet stood at the entrance to the ruins, her armor gleaming, her expression furious. She had caught up to them. Natsu, Gray, Lucy, you have broken the guild's most sacred rule, she declared. You are coming back with me to face your punishment. Now, Urza, you don't understand, Lucy pleaded. We have to stop them. They're trying to resurrect the demon Deliora. I am aware of the mission parameters, Urza said coldly, and you are not qualified to handle it. She took a step forward, her intent clear. She's right, Naruto said, his calm voice surprising everyone. He Ed to stand between Urza and the rest of the team. You are not qualified. He then looked directly at Urza. But neither are you. None of you understand what's actually happening here. Urza's eyes narrowed dangerously. And I suppose you do. Yes, Naruto stated, with no trace of arrogance, only certainty. This isn't about resurrecting a demon. That thing in the ice is just a battery. A corpse they are using as a beacon. The moon drip ritual is a massive, long-range summoning spell. They are trying to pull something from another plane of existence, something that shares Deliora's demonic nature. If they succeed, it won't just destroy this island. It will create a gateway for more to follow. He let his words sink in. He wasn't pleading or arguing. He was giving a tactical briefing. The sheer scope of what he was describing, the cold logic of it, stopped Urza in her tracks. She was a brilliant strategist herself, and she recognized the horrifying ring of truth in his assessment. T.S. was no longer just about a rampaging demon. This was about a potential otherworldly invasion. How can you know this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. My senses are different, Naruto said simply. I can feel the shape of the energy. I can feel what it's trying to do. He looked up at the purple moon, which was now pulsing with a sickening light. And it's almost complete. Just then, Gray, in a desperate move, managed to defeat Leon, but it was too late. The ritual, automated, hit its apex. The column of light intensified, and the very air began to tear. A rift, a dark wound in the fabric of space, began to form within the purple moon. It's over. You've failed. A triumphant Sherry cackled from the sidelines. No, Naruto said, it's not. He walked to the center of the ruins. Directly under the column of purple light. He held out his right hand, palm up. Everyone, get back. Naruto, what are you doing? Urza shouted, a new kind of alarm in her voice. He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes and took a breath. He drew on his own chakra, mixing it with the natural energy of the island. Not the corrupted parts, but the pure life force that still existed deep within the earth. A pinwheel of brilliant white energy began to form in his palm. It shrieked, a sound that cut through the low hum of the moon drip, a sound like 1,000 birds screaming at once. The air around him distorted. It grew, expanding into a four-pointed shuriken of pure, razor-sharp wind, with a perfect sphere of roiling energy at its core. Futon. Rasenshuriken. Urza stared, her breath catching in her throat. The sheer density of the power contained in that attack was unlike any magic she had ever witnessed. It wasn't just destructive. It felt conceptual. It felt like it could erase things from existence. She was stunned, not just by the scale of the power, but by the perfect, effortless control he exhibited. This spell is an affront to the natural order, Naruto said, his voice low but carrying with immense power. So I'll correct it. He threw it. The Rasenshuriken shot upwards into the column of purple light. It didn't explode on contact. It flew straight up the beam, a comet of white purity ascending through a river of corruption. As it traveled, the microscopic wind blades that comprised the attack began to do their work. They didn't just disrupt the magic, they attacked its very structure. Shredding the magical formula on a conceptual level, unwriting the spell one microscopic piece at a time. The purple light began to fizzle and die. The ominous hum turned into a high-pitched scream of failure. The rift in the sky wavered, then collapsed in on itself. When the Rasenshuriken reached the moon, the energy lens shattered, not in an explosion, but by dissolving into a billion motes of harmless silver light, like dust in the wind. The sky cleared. The eerie purple glow vanished, replaced by the normal blue of a sunny day. The corruption that had plagued the island for years was gone, scoured clean in a single, decisive act. The air felt clean again. Everyone, Natsu, Lucy, Gray, Urza, and what remained of Lion's team, stared in absolute, reverent silence. The ice below the temple, no longer being infused with magical energy, began to crack and fall away, revealing the colossal, frozen form of Deliora. But it wasn't reviving. It was crumbling. The demon, it turned out, was already dead. Ur's iced shell had not just trapped it, it had slowly, over 10 long years, drained its life force completely. Gray fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as the truth washed over him. His master's sacrifice had not been in vain. She had won, all those years ago. Later, as the sun began to set, Naruto found Gray sitting alone on the beach, staring out at the ocean. He sat down next to him, the silence stretching comfortably between them. Your master was a strong woman, Naruto said finally. Gray wiped at his eyes, not bothering to hide his tears. She was. I spent so long trying to surpass her, to beat the demon she couldn't. I was so focused on my own weakness that I never saw her strength. A past left to fester becomes a cage, Naruto said, his gaze distant. I had a friend once. My brother, in all but blood. He was consumed by a desire for revenge, for power. He was convinced that to be strong, he had to sever every bond he had. I spent years chasing him, trying to show him that our bond wasn't a weakness, but the source of my strength. He looked at Gray, his eyes filled with a wisdom far beyond his years. Your master didn't leave you a demon to conquer. She left you a lesson to learn. Don't let your obsession with her sacrifice trap you in the past. Live a life that makes her proud. That's how you truly honor her. Gray looked at Naruto, at the quiet strength and profound empathy in his eyes, and felt a weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying begin to lift. Thank you, Naruto. From a distance, hidden in the shadows of the jungle, Urza watched them. She had heard Naruto's words. She had seen him not just shatter a world-threatening spell with godlike power, but also sit down and heal a comrade's wounded heart with quiet wisdom. She saw a warrior who understood that the greatest battles are not fought with fists, but with the soul. Her respect, already immense, was now transforming into something deeper. And a powerful, undeniable sense of kinship with the strange, lonely, and unbelievably strong man who had fallen into their world. Far above them, beyond the blue sky and the silent stars, the cosmic entity known as Malachor registered the event on Galuna Island. It had felt the resonance beacon activate, a lure for a lesser chaotic entity. But then it felt the beacon being extinguished. Not just turned off, but violently corrected. The very fabric of the local reality matrix had been forcibly retuned. The anomaly was not passive. It was actively and powerfully imposing its own order on this new reality. The threat assessment was updated. Observation was no longer sufficient. A new directive was issued into the void. A scout was to be dispatched. Its purpose: to observe, to analyze, and to confirm the threat level of the Nexus anomaly designated Naruto Uzumaki. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. War for the Fairies. The journey back from Galuna Island was a heavy one. Urza, true to her word, escorted them all back to the guild, her armor gleaming and her expression unreadable. Natsu, Gray, and Lucy braced for the worst, fully expecting to be expelled. Naruto was quiet, his thoughts not on the guild's rules, but on the chilling sensation he'd felt as the moon drip ritual peaked, that fleeting, terrifying connection to something vast and malevolent from beyond. It was a problem for another day, but a problem that now sat in the back of his mind, a coiled serpent waiting to strike. When they entered the guild hall, Master Makarov was waiting. He didn't yell, he didn't lecture, he simply listened as Urza gave a full, unvarnished report. She spoke of their rule breaking, of Natsu's recklessness, of Gray's personal demons. But then her tone shifted. She spoke of Naruto's analysis, of the true nature of the moon drip, of a threat far greater than anyone had realized. And she described, in a voice filled with a warrior's awe, the sheer, world-altering power of the Recentrican that had not just destroyed the spell, but had cleansed the entire island. When she finished, the hall was silent. Makarov looked at the four of them, his ancient eyes lingering on Naruto. He then hopped onto a table, and to everyone's shock, he bowed his head deeply. On behalf of the client and the people of Galuna Island, I thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You broke our rules, and for that, there should be punishment. But you also saved that island from a fate we cannot comprehend and helped one of our own find peace. The spirit of the law has been upheld. If not the letter. He looked up, a tear in his eye. Your only punishment is this: remember what it means to be a part of fairy tale. We are family. We do not leave our own to face their demons alone. Quote. The guild erupted in cheers. Lucy burst into tears of relief, Natsu whooped in triumph, and Gray managed a small, grateful smile. Naruto just watched, a faint warmth spreading through his chest. Family. He was beginning to understand what that word truly meant in this new world. The celebration, however, was short-lived. The next morning, the guild was quiet. Naruto was sitting at a table with Lucy, Urza, and Gray, listening as Lucy animatedly recounted their adventure to a fascinated Mirajan. Natsu was, as usual, trying to pick a fight with anyone who made eye contact. It was a peaceful, domestic scene, the kind of moment Naruto had fought a war to protect. The moment shattered when the front doors of the guild creaked open. A shadow fell across the floor. Standing in the doorway was a man who seemed to be made of iron and scorn. He was tall, with long, wild black hair, and his face was covered in piercings. He wore a feathered coat over a bare chest, and his arms were adorned with metal gauntlets. But it was his aura that silenced the room. It was cold, sharp, and dripping with contempt. Well, look at this pathetic little bug-infested hole, the man drawled. His voice a low growl. I'm looking for someone named Lucy Heartfilia. The little runaway princess. Lucy froze, the color draining from her face. Gajiel, she whispered, her voice trembling. Naruto's head lifted. His senses, always active, catalogued the new arrival. The man, Gajiel, had a power signature that felt like jagged, raw metal. A dragon slayer, like Natsu. But his power was coarse and brutal where Natsu's was wild and free. More importantly, he registered the guild mark on Gajiel's shoulder. A skeletal, phantom-like creature. Phantom Lord. Fairy Tale's biggest rival. What do you want? Phantom scum. Macau shouted, getting to his feet. Gajiel just smirked. Just delivering a message from our master, Jose. He took a step inside, his eyes scanning the room, dismissing everyone until they landed on Naruto. For a split second, their eyes met. Gajiel's smirk faltered. He felt nothing. He was a master at sensing magical power, at gauging an opponent's strength. But when he looked at the quiet blonde in the corner, it was like looking into a void. It wasn't weakness, it was an absence, an emptiness so complete it was unsettling. Shaking off the feeling, he refocused on his task. The message is simple. Fairy tale is finished. With a sudden, brutal movement, he lashed out. A black iron pillar shot from his arm, not aimed at a person, but at the guild's central support beam. The pillar struck with devastating force, cracking the ancient wood. Then another, and another. He moved with savage glee, systematically wrecking the empty tables, the request board, the bar. It was a declaration of war. Natsu, with a roar of pure rage, launched himself at Gajiel. You'll pay for that. Their clash was brief and brutal. Natsu's fire against Gajiel's iron. But Gajiel was stronger, more ruthless. He met Natsu's fire dragon's iron fist with his own iron dragon's club, sending Natsu flying back into a wall. Before anyone else could react, Naruto was on his feet. He wasn't radiating power, he wasn't shouting. He just moved, placing himself between the advancing Gajiel and the rest of the guild. That's enough, Naruto said. His voice was calm, but it held an edge of tempered steel. Gajiel laughed. Oh, and who are you? The welcome committee. He lunged, an iron spear extending from his hand, aimed directly at Naruto's heart. Naruto didn't move. At the last possible instant, he sidestepped. The spear shot past him. As it did, Naruto's hand snapped out and gripped the iron pole. Gajiel tried to retract it, but it wouldn't budge. He was connected to an immovable object. I said, Naruto repeated, his blue eyes hardening into chips of ice, that's enough. He squeezed. The solid iron spear, an extension of Gajiel's own magic and body, began to creak. Then, with a sound like stone grinding to dust, the iron crumbled in Naruto's grip. It didn't bend or break. It disintegrated into metallic powder. Gajiel stared, his jaw slack. His iron, his unbeatable iron, had been crushed by bare-handed strength. The feedback from the destruction of his own magic sent a painful jolt up his arm. He instinctively recoiled, stumbling back a step, a flicker of genuine shock and fear in his eyes. This is your only warning, Naruto said, letting the metallic dust sift through his fingers. Get out of our home. The threat was clear. It wasn't a challenge to a fight. It was a final notice before annihilation. Gajiel, for the first time in a long time, felt a primal instinct for self-preservation kick in. He spat on the floor. This isn't over, fairy tale, he snarled. Trying to regain his bravado, he turned and stalked out of the guild, leaving a trail of destruction and a stunned silence in his wake. The silence was broken by the sound of something heavy falling outside. Everyone rushed out. What they saw made their blood run cold. Their guild's sacred Tenro tree, which stood in the central courtyard, had been impaled by massive iron girders, brutally pinning 3 of their own to its trunk: Jet, Droy, and Levi Magarden. They were beaten, broken, and branded with the Phantom Lord sigil. The attack on the hull was an insult. This was unforgivable. Naruto's face, which had been a mask of cold anger, became utterly blank. It was an expression more terrifying than any rage. He had seen this before. The senseless cruelty, the targeting of the vulnerable, the desecration of a symbol. It was the face of war. And war was something he knew intimately. He walked to the tree. Urza was already there, her hands shaking with fury as she carefully worked to free Levi. Naruto placed a hand on the iron girder pinning the small girl. He didn't pull, he just pushed his chakra into it, a specific frequency that caused the metal to vibrate at a molecular level. The iron turned brittle, and with a gentle twist, he snapped the massive girder in 2, allowing Urza to lift Levi free. He knelt beside the small, unconscious brunette. He could see the extent of her injuries. They were severe. He placed his hand over her chest, not touching, and a soft, green light enveloped her. It wasn't conventional healing magic. It was pure life force. The same power the Sage of 6 Paths had used to create. The worst of her internal injuries began to mend, her breathing evening out, the bleeding stopping. It was a temporary fix, but it would give her a fighting chance. He stood up, his gaze sweeping over the horrified faces of his guildmates. He saw their rage, their sorrow, their fear. He then looked at Makarov, who was trembling, his magical power starting to flare. A storm gathering around the small master. "Master," Naruto said, his voice quiet but cutting through the rising tide of anger. This was a declaration. They will expect us to retaliate with emotion. With rage. And they will get it. Makarov roared, his body beginning to grow. "They have harmed my children. They will know the wrath of a fairy tale wizard. And we will give it to them." Naruto agreed, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "But not like this. Not as a brawl. As a war." Makarov paused, his transformation halting. He looked at Naruto. He saw not a hot-headed youth, but a seasoned commander. "They struck our home and our family," Naruto continued, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "We will not just answer. We will dismantle them. We will tear their guild down to the foundations. We will break their master. We will leave them with nothing. We will make them an example to anyone who ever considers harming a member of this family again." His words were not a rallying cry. They were a vow, a cold, calculated, and utterly terrifying promise. The raw fury of the guild began to coalesce, to focus, drawn to the quiet, unshakable certainty in his voice. He had just given their rage a purpose and a plan. The war for the fairies had begun. And Naruto Uzumaki was its general. Phantom Lord's Guild Hall was a monstrous thing, a Gion-Chi mechanical fortress that could walk on metal legs. When Fairy Tail arrived, it was waiting for them, looming over the city of Oak Town like a titan. "That's their guild," Lucy gasped, staring up at the impossible structure. "It matters not," Urza said, re-equipping into her Heaven's Wheel armor. "We will bring it down." "Wait," Naruto commanded, holding up a hand. The charging guild members paused. This is their ground. They have the high ground and fortified positions. A frontal assault is what they expect. It's what they want. "So what do we do, Naruto ni?" a bandaged but determined elfman asked, looking to him for direction. The entire guild was. Naruto's eyes scanned the mechanical fortress. A structure that large has a power source. Gajil's magic is iron. Natsu's is fire. Their master, Jose, likely has something equally tangible. But the guild itself, it runs on a different kind of magic. We cripple its legs, we ground it. Then we assault from all sides. He pointed to the massive joints of the mechanical legs. "Urza, Gray, you lead teams and target the joints. Freeze them, shatter them." "Natsu." "Yeah," Natsu grinned, fire already dancing on his fists. "You're with me. We're going to pay their master a visit." Quote, "And what about me?" Lucy asked, her voice small. Naruto turned to her. He saw the fear in her eyes. Phantom Lord had started this because of her father's bounty. The guilt was eating her alive. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm and reassuring. "You are the reason we are fighting. Which makes you the most important person here. Stay with the main group. Stay safe. We are doing this for you." His words were a shield. He didn't dismiss her fear. He validated her importance, turning her perceived liability into the very banner they fought under. Lucy's eyes welled with tears, but she nodded, her resolve hardening. The assault began. Urza and Gray led their teams, a beautiful, deadly symphony of swords and ice, crashing against the fortress's legs. The Phantom Lord wizards poured out, and the battle began in earnest. While the chaos raged below, Naruto and Natsu took a different route. Naruto grabbed Natsu and leapt. One single, chakra-fueled jump that carried them hundreds of feet into the air, landing them on the fortress's high shoulder, bypassing the bulk of the enemy forces. "Whoa, do that again," Natsu yelled. Later, Naruto said, his senses already pinpointing the largest concentration of power in the building. This way, they smashed their way inside, Naruto moving with brutal efficiency, Natsu with gleeful destruction. They were a whirlwind of quiet competence and explosive chaos. Phantom mages who stood in their way were dispatched before they could even cast their spells. Naruto would disarm and disable. Natsu would follow up with a fiery blast. Their path was cut short when a massive figure blocked their path. A man with a perpetually bored expression and sky-blue hair. The leader of the Element 4, Arya of the Great Sky. This is a place of lamentation, Arya said, his eyes closed. Your boisterousness is not welcome. Zetsume. The very air in the corridor seemed to die. The Ethernano was drained from the atmosphere. A spell designed to render wizards powerless. Natsu stumbled, feeling his magic being siphoned away. I can't use my fire. Arya smiled sadly. It is over. But Naruto was unaffected. His chakra was his own, an internal power source completely independent of the Ethernano in the air. The dead air zone was an inconvenience, nothing more. You talk too much, Naruto said. He vanished from sight, appearing directly in front of the shocked Arya. He drove his fist forward, not into Arya's face, but into the wall just beside his head. The punch carried no magical energy. It was just pure, focused physical force. The metal wall buckled, a crater forming around his fist. The shockwave, however, was immense. Arya was thrown back, his spell shattering as his concentration broke. His ears ringing from the sonic boom of the impact. He landed in a heap, unconscious. Show off, Natsu grumbled, feeling his fire return. They continued on, finally blasting their way into the throne room. There, sitting on a high-backed chair, was Jose Porla, master of Phantom Lord. He was a ghostly, ethereal figure, his face hidden in shadow. And standing beside his throne was a defeated, chained Gajeel. And a terrified, captive Lucy. Natsu, Naruto. Lucy cried out, tears streaming down her face. Gajeel had slipped away during the battle below and had gone straight for the prize. Natsu's rage was absolute. Jose, Gajeel, I'll kill you. Jose just chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Welcome, fairies. You see, this was never just about a rivalry. This was a paid contract. From the Heartfilia family, they want their little girl back. And I always deliver. Naruto's eyes were fixed on Lucy. He saw her shame, her fear. He saw the chains, and something inside him, a cold, protective instinct he hadn't felt so keenly since the war, snapped into focus. Let her go, Jose, Naruto said. It wasn't a request. Jose laughed louder. You were in no position to make demands, boy. My shades will tear you apart. Ghostly, ethereal soldiers began to rise from the floor, their eyes glowing with malevolent light. While Natsu launched himself into a furious battle with Gajeel, a brutal rematch fueled by rage and pride, Naruto faced Jose. The shades swarmed him. You cannot touch what is not there, Jose hissed. My magic is death. My soldiers are ghosts. The shades passed through Naruto's body, their chilling touch trying to drain his life force. But they found nothing to drain. His life force, his chakra, was anchored by the Biju within him, a furnace of energy they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Your mistake, Naruto said, his body beginning to glow with a faint, golden light, is thinking I need to touch them. He raised his hand, Shinra Tensei, an invisible, almighty force erupted from his body. It wasn't wind, it wasn't magic, it was pure, gravitational force. A push. Jose's shades didn't just get blown back, they were conceptually repulsed, the real forms shredded by a power that warped the very space they occupied. They dissolved into screaming wisps of nothingness. Jose stared, his ethereal form flickering in shock. What is that power? That is not a wizard's magic. I am not a wizard, Naruto replied, his voice echoing with the power of the Sage of Six Paths. He took a step forward, the golden aura around him intensifying. His eyes were no longer just blue. They were now a brilliant gold, with a cross-like pattern in them, a sign that he was drawing on the full power of Sage Mode. The natural energy of the world, what little there was in this metal fortress, flocked to him, eager to serve. You have harmed my friend, Naruto said, his voice a low growl that seemed to shake the entire fortress. You have attacked my home. You have threatened my family. He appeared directly in front of Jose's throne, moving so fast he seemed to teleport. He reached out, not with his hand, but with a construct of pure, golden chakra. A massive, spectral hand formed in the air and seized Jose's ghostly form. Jose screamed as the golden chakra burned him, a holy fire against his dark magic. Impossible. I am intangible. Everything that exists can be touched. Naruto countered, his grip tightening. He lifted Jose into the air, holding the screaming guild master like a rag doll. I promised I would make you an example. And I am a man of my word. He didn't just crush him. He held him there, forcing the terrified Phantom Lord Master to watch as, on the other side of the room, Natsu finally, decisively, defeated Gajeel with a spectacular dragon roar. He made him watch as Urza, Gray, and Elfman burst into the room, their battle below won. He made Jose Porla witness the utter and complete defeat of his guild, the triumph of the family he had tried to break. Then, Naruto turned his gaze back to Jose. Tell me, he said, his voice deceptively soft. Was it worth it? He then clenched the chakra hand into a fist. Jose's form was compressed, his dark magic snuffed out like a candle in a hurricane, until he was nothing more than a small, dark sphere of condensed energy. Naruto didn't destroy him. He sealed him. He trapped the master of Phantom Lord inside a pocket of unbreakable chakra, a permanent prison of his own defeated ambition. The fortress, its master defeated and its power source gone, began to shudder and collapse. Naruto moved in a blur, appearing beside Lucy, the chains on her wrists rusting and falling away at his touch. He stood in front of her, shielding her from the falling debris. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His presence was a promise. You are safe. In the aftermath, amidst the ruins of Phantom Lord's ambitions, the fairy tale wizards regrouped. They were bruised, battered, but victorious. Lucy, her tears finally spent, walked up to Naruto. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He just nodded, the golden aura receding, his eyes returning to their normal blue. The general was gone. The quiet, watchful friend was back, but as he stood there, watching his new family celebrate their hard-won victory, he did something he rarely did. He looked at his own hand. The hand that had just effortlessly defeated a man considered one of the most powerful wizards on the continent. The power he wielded, the power that had saved his old world, was a terrifying, monstrous thing in this one. Here, he wasn't just a strong ninja. He was something else entirely. A god walking among mortals. The thought didn't bring him pride. It brought him a quiet, profound sense of dread. Because he knew that powers like his didn't just attract rivals like Jose. They attracted predators like Malachor. From her place beside Elfman, Mirajan watched Naruto. She had seen him move, seen him fight, seen the righteous, terrifying fury he'd unleashed in the name of their family. She had spent years hiding her own demonic power, her own ferocious nature, beneath a sweet smile, afraid of what she was capable of. But in Naruto, she saw that same ferocity wielded not as a weapon of destruction, but as a shield for those he loved. He wasn't afraid of his power. He controlled it. He directed it. He was a demon in the service of angels. And for the first time in a very long time, Mirajan Strauss felt her own sleeping soul stir, not with fear, but with a deep, resonant admiratio. And for the kind-hearted monster who had just saved them all. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Knight and the Sage. The destruction of Phantom Lord sent shockwaves through the entire Kingdom of Fury. It wasn't just a victory. It was an eradication. A guild that had stood as one of the most powerful for decades was dismantled in a single day, its master vanished and its members scattered. The stories that trickled out were wild and contradictory, but they all shared one common, unbelievable thread. A new, unknown wizard in fairy tale who wielded a power that wasn't magic, a power that could command gravity and crush a man's soul with a touch. Fairy tale didn't celebrate their victory with a party. They rebuilt. The attack on their home had left deep scars, both physical and emotional. Every member, from the strongest to the weakest, put their hands to work, sawing wood, hammering nails, and slowly, piece by piece, raising their guild hall from the ashes. There was a solemn determination in their work, a shared purpose that forged their bonds even tighter. Naruto worked alongside them, his movements economical and tireless. He could have rebuilt the entire structure in an hour with his wood style, but he didn't. He understood this wasn't about efficiency. It was a ritual. It was about healing. He lifted beams that took 10 men to move, hammered nails with the force of a pile driver, and offered a quiet, steady presence that became the bedrock of their reconstruction efforts. He found Lucy one afternoon sitting on a stack of lumber, staring at her hands. The guilt hadn't left her. "They're rebuilding the guild I let get destroyed," she said quietly, not looking at him. Levi is still recovering. All because my father couldn't just let me go. Naruto sat down beside her, the scent of fresh cut pine in the air. A child is not responsible for the sins of their father, he said, his voice gentle. This wasn't your fault, Lucy. This was Jose's greed and your father's pride. The guild isn't rebuilding because of you. They're rebuilding for you, and for Levi, and for each other. That's the difference. He stood up and held out a hand. Come on. The roof trusses need to be lifted. She looked at his offered hand. Then up at his face. His eyes held no pity, only a simple, comradely expectation. He wasn't comforting her. He was calling her back to her family. She took his hand, and his grip was warm and strong. But peace, in the world of fairy tale, was a fleeting thing. One evening, as the new guild hall was nearing completion, the core members of Team Natsu, along with Naruto, were relaxing at Fairy Hills. The girls' dormitory. They were visiting a still recovering Lucy when they were interrupted by the arrival of Loke, the guild's resident womanizer, who seemed to be in a state of quiet panic. His usual suave demeanor was gone, replaced by a desperate intensity that was focused entirely on Lucy. Before the strange encounter could escalate, a new group entered the room. Their presence immediately chilling the atmosphere. They were a bizarre collection of individuals. A man with a puppet, a woman dressed like a poodle, and a tall, stoic man with dark hair. Their lead was a man with vibrant blue hair and a strange red tattoo over his right eye. Urza's entire body went rigid. Her breath hitched. A look of pure, unadulterated terror, an emotion Naruto had never thought to see on her face, overtook her features. Jello, she whispered, her voice trembling. The man, Jello, smiled, a cold, predatory expression that didn't reach his eyes. It's been a long time, Urza. I've come to take you back. Back to the Tower of Heaven. It's time for you to become the sacrifice for our freedom. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He felt the history between them, a thick, cloying miasma of shared trauma. But he also felt the magic. Jalal's power was immense, astronomical, on a level that dwarfed anyone he had met in this world so far. But it felt wrong. Tainted. Like a beautiful song played on a broken instrument. Urza, what's going on? Natsu demanded, stepping forward, fists already clenched. Who are these creeps? They're old friends, Urza said, her voice strained. She took a step back. A movement of pure instinctual fear. You can't fight them. You have to run. The idea of Urza Scarlet, Titania, the queen of the fairies, telling them to run was so inconceivable it stunned everyone into silence. Before anyone could react, one of Jalal's subordinates, a man named Wally, used his block magic, his body twisting into a series of cubes, and snatched Urza. In the confusion, Jalal and his cronies made their escape, taking a terrified, struggling Urza with them. Natsu roared, launching himself after them, only to be blocked by another of Jalal's allies, Miliana, who trapped him in a magic-restricting tube. The guild was in an uproar. Urza had been kidnapped, but the reaction was different this time. They were confused. Urza herself had seemed terrified, resigned to her fate. The Tower of Heaven, Mirajan whispered, her face pale. It was a project from years ago, run by a dark magic cult. They used slaves to build it, trying to resurrect the dark wizard Zirf. They called it the R system. Slaves? Gray asked, his voice low. Urza was. The pieces clicked into place. The haunted look that sometimes appeared in Urza's eyes, her rigid self-discipline. Her fierce devotion to her guild family, it was all rooted in a past far darker than anyone had imagined. Naruto stood amidst the chaos, his mind a whirlwind of strategic thought. This wasn't a guild war. This was a rescue mission. But it was more than that. Jalal's power was immense, and his goal, the resurrection of a legendary dark wizard, was a world-ending threat. We're going after her, Natsu declared, having finally broken free of his bonds. Of course we are, Gray agreed, his expression grim. But she said to run, Lucy said, her voice trembling. She was scared, truly scared. That's why we have to go, a new voice said. Naruto turned. He hadn't spoken. The voice had come from beside him. It was Juvia Loxer, a former member of Phantom Lord's Element 4. Who had developed a rather intense obsession with Gray and had been shadowing the guild ever since their defeat. Urza is fairy tale, Juvia said, her usual dreamy expression replaced with a fierce determination. Juvia will not stand by while a member of Grey-sama's family is in danger. Naruto looked from her to the others. He saw their fear, but he also saw their resolve. He then walked over to a map of Fury pinned to the wall. His finger traced the coastline. The tower is here, he said, his voice cutting through the chatter. Off the coast, near Kylum. It will be heavily guarded. Jalal's power is significant, likely on par with or greater than Makarov's. He was lowballing it, for their sake. He could sense Jalal's energy signature even from here, a malevolent star on the horizon. We are outmatched in terms of raw magical power. So what? We just gotta punch him harder. Natsu declared. No, Naruto said, turning to face them. We fight smarter. He looked directly at Natsu. Your fire won't be enough. Gray, your ice will be a key asset. Lucy, your spirits are our wild card. Juvia, your water can counter their numbers. He was already formulating a plan, assigning roles, turning their individual strengths into a cohesive strategy. He then looked around the room, his gaze resting on each of them. But this mission isn't about defeating Jelal. It's about saving Urza, and not just her body. Her spirit. He remembered the look on her face. The terror. The resignation. She believes she has to face this alone. She believes she's a sacrifice. We are going there to prove her wrong. We are going to remind her that she is not a slave. She is a knight of fairy tale. And she does not fight alone. His words resonated deeply with them. He had taken their frantic, emotional desire to help and forged it into a clear, noble purpose. This wasn't just a rescue. It was an affirmation of everything their guild stood for. The Tower of Heaven was a horrifying monument to obsession. A massive crystalline structure that clawed at the sky, pulsing with a sickly purple light. The air around it was thick with the stench of dark magic and the faint, ghostly echoes of immense suffering. Naruto, Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Juvia arrived on a stolen boat, the tower looming over them. All right, let's storm the place. Natsu yelled, ready to charge. Hold on, Naruto said, his senses already mapping the entire structure. The tower is saturated with magical energy. It's a giant amplifier. Jelal is at the top, his power magnified by the tower itself. His three strongest warriors, the Trinity Raven, are positioned at key intersections. The rest are fodder. We split up. Natsu, you're a straight-line fighter. You go up the middle. Draw their attention. Gray, Juvia, you're a team. Your elements complement each other. Take the west wing. Lucy, you're with me. Your spirits offer the most tactical flexibility. What about you? Gray asked. I'm going to find Urza, Naruto stated simply. Natsu, your job is to make as much noise as possible. Gray, your job is to disable the tower's secondary power conduits. They run through the west wing. It won't stop Jelal, but it will weaken the tower's structural integrity fields. Lucy and I will provide support and clear a path. It was a professional battle plan, delivered with the calm authority of a seasoned commander. There were no arguments. They split up, and the infiltration began. Natsu, true to his nature, was a roaring inferno, blasting his way upwards. Gray and Juvia worked in perfect, deadly harmony, a bliss. Art of ice and water that overwhelmed their opponents. Naruto and Lucy moved through the eastern corridors like ghosts. Naruto didn't fight, he simply removed obstacles. A guard would turn a corner and find himself suddenly, inexplicably unconscious. A magical trap would trigger, only to be unraveled by a flicker of chakra before it could fully form. He was a whisper, a shadow, and Lucy could only follow in his wake. Utterly stunned by his silent, terrifying efficiency. Open, Gate of the Archer. Sagittarius, she summoned, as they came upon a large platoon of guards. Moshi Moshi, are we aiming for victory? The horse-headed spirit asked. Just keep them busy, Naruto said, before blurring past the entire conflict. He was a scalpel, cutting his way to the heart of the problem, while his comrades were the hammer. Breaking the fortress around them. He found Urza in a dark, circular chamber, chained to a stone altar. She was no longer in her armor. She was in the simple, tattered clothes of a slave, the same clothes she had worn as a child in this very tower. She looked broken. Naruto, she whispered, her voice hoarse. You shouldn't have come. This is my burden to bear. My sin. There is no sin in surviving, he said. His voice soft. He walked to the altar and placed his hands on her chains. He didn't break them. He simply poured his chakra into the metal, causing them to disintegrate into dust. He helped her to her feet. She was weak, her magical energy suppressed by the tower's ambient field. It's too late, she said, her eyes vacant. He's going to complete the tower. He's going to use my body as a vessel for Zirf. He's not going to do anything, Naruto said, his voice firm. He met her gaze, his blue eyes boring into hers, willing her to see. Listen to me, Urza. You are not a sacrifice. You are not a tool. You are Urza Scarlet of Fairy Tale. The woman who stood against Phantom Lord, who protected her family. The woman who wears her armor like a shield not to hide, but to protect others. That is who you are. This place, this man, they don't define you. His words were like a physical force, chipping away at the walls she had built around her heart. But the trauma ran too deep. You don't understand, she sobbed, tears finally breaking free. It was my fault. I was the one who led the rebellion. I was the one who left him behind. I abandoned my friends. Before Naruto could respond, Jalal's voice echoed through the chamber, dripping with mock sympathy. Oh, she remembers. How touching. Jalal floated down from the ceiling, his eyes glowing with power. You see, stranger, Urza was our messiah. She gave us hope, and then she ran, leaving us to suffer. I simply picked up where she left off. I finished her work. I completed the Tower of Heaven, our paradise. This isn't paradise, Naruto countered, stepping in front of Urza protectively. It's a tomb built on the backs of children. Semantics, Jalal sneered. Now, give her back to me. The ritual must be completed. He raised a hand, and the very heavens seemed to obey him. Golden light gathered, forming intricate magical circles. Grand chariot, 7 pillars of celestial light shot down, aimed at Naruto. Naruto didn't even try to dodge. He just raised his own hand. Bansho Tenon. The gravitational force reversed. The pillars of light, powerful enough to obliterate a town, wavered, bent, and were then violently pulled towards Naruto's hand, compressing into a single, roiling ball of unstable celestial energy. He held it in his palm, a miniature, captive star. Jalal stared, his smug confidence evaporating, replaced by stark disbelief. He caught it. He caught heavenly body magic. Your stars are pretty, Naruto said, his voice dangerously calm. But they're nothing special. He closed his fist. The ball of light imploded, vanishing without a sound, a feat of control that was even more terrifying than catching it. The battle was a study in contrasts. Jalal unleashed the fury of the cosmos. Meteors, black holes, beams of stellar energy. He was a god of destruction. Naruto just dealt with it. He moved with an unearthly grace, a simple step avoiding a meteor. A flick of the wrist deflecting a beam of light. He wasn't just dodging. He was treating Jalal's ultimate magic like a child's tantrum. Why won't you fall? Jalal screamed, his composure finally breaking. My magic is absolute. The power of the stars themselves. Because you're weak, Naruto said, appearing directly in front of him. He wasn't even breathing hard. You have all this power. But you're still just a scared little boy hiding in a tower, obsessed with a ghost. You're a slave to a past you can't let go of. His words struck a deeper blow than any physical attack. Jalal reeled back, a flicker of the boy he once was showing through the cracks in his madness. It was in that moment of weakness that Urza acted. Fueled by Naruto's words, by his unwavering belief in her, a spark of her old fire returned. She re-equipped into her strongest armor, the Armadura Fairy, and charged, her sword a blur of righteous fury. She, not Naruto, was the one who struck the final blow, ASLA. Shish that carried the weight of all her pain, her guilt, and her newfound resolve. Jalal was sent crashing into the tower's central lacrima, the massive crystal that powered the entire structure. But their victory was short-lived. The Magic Council, from a continent away, had made a decision. The R system was too dangerous to be left standing. They had voted to fire their ultimate weapon, the satellite cannon, Etherian. Alarms blared through the tower. A voice from a magical projection announced their fate. Etherian has been fired. Impact in 3 minutes. Etherian. Urza gasped, her face pale. It has the power to wipe a country off the map. We have to get out of here. But as they ran, they found Jello, laughing maniacally, fused with the central lacrima. Fools. This was my plan all along. The tower was built to absorb magical energy. Etherian won't destroy it. It will complete it. It will give it the power it needs to resurrect Zirf. The sky above them tore open, and a colossal beam of pure, blinding magical energy descended. There was nowhere to run. Get behind me, Naruto said, his voice a low command. He walked out onto an open balcony, directly into the path of the descending cataclysm. Naruto, no, Urza screamed, reaching for him. You can't stop it. It's pure magical power. He didn't look back. He just raised his hands, palms facing the sky. The golden sage mode aura flared around him. Brighter than ever before. The Biju within him, now fully awake and acclimated, roared in unison in his mind, lending him their immense power. The beam of Etherian struck. There was no explosion, no earth-shattering impact. The world went white. When Urza and the others could see again, they witnessed the impossible. Naruto was standing in the same spot, his clothes torn, his body steaming. But he was standing. He had caught the blast. The colossal, country-destroying power of Etherian was contained between his two hands, a raging, swirling vortex of unimaginable energy. He wasn't just blocking it. He was holding it. He's absorbing it. Lucy shrieked, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. Naruto gritted his teeth, his muscles straining. The sheer volume of energy was staggering. Even for him. But his 6 paths power gave him mastery over all forms of energy. To him, this wasn't magic. It was just a particularly large, unruly ball of chakra. Your toy, he grunted. His voice strained but powerful, is too noisy. With a final, deafening roar that was more will than sound, he didn't just dissipate the energy. He took control of it. He compressed the entire Etherian blast into a single, blindingly white sphere of power no bigger than his Rasengan, holding it in his right hand. The tower, instead of being supercharged, was left untouched. Jello, fused to the lacrima, screamed in fury and disbelief. His perfect plan, undone by an impossible man. Naruto turned, the captive sun in his hand illuminating his determined face. He looked at Jello. His talk no jutsu was different now, honed by age and experience. It wasn't a plea, it was a diagnosis. You were a slave, Jello, Naruto said, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. But you chose to put chains on someone else. You took your pain and tried to make the world suffer with you. That's not freedom. That's just cowardice. He looked at Urza, who was staring at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Urza found freedom. She found it in friendship. In family. In a home called Fairy Tale. That's a strength you'll never understand. He then opened his hand. The compressed sphere of Etherian didn't explode. It simply unraveled, dissolving into a gentle shower of golden light that rained down over the ocean, harmless and beautiful. The sheer, absolute mastery of that act was the final blow. Jello, his mind broken, his plan in ruins, was finally defeated, not by a punch, but by the weight of his own failure. The tower, its power source inert, began to crumble for good. As they escaped the collapsing structure, Urza made a choice. To save Jello from the tower's destruction, and from himself, she forcibly fused her own body with the Etherian-infused lacrima, intending to guide it into the sky and sacrifice herself. But Naruto was there. He appeared beside her as she ascended, a golden blur against the sky. I told you, he said, his voice gentle as he reached out and took her hand, pulling her free from the crystal. No more sacrifices. He placed a hand on the unstable lacrima. Using the creation of all things, he didn't destroy it. He stabilized it, turning the volatile, destructive energy into a solid, inert crystal that shot harmlessly into the heavens, becoming a new, permanent star in the night sky. They landed on the beach below, where Natsu, Gray, and Lucy were waiting. Urza, finally free of her past, her armor gone, stood in the shallow water, the setting sun turning the ocean to gold. She looked at Naruto, at the man who had not just saved her, but had empowered her to save herself. The man who had faced down a god's weapon and treated it like an inconvenience. The unspoken bond between them, forged in the fires of battle and a shared understanding of pain, finally solidified. It wasn't just respect anymore. It was something deeper, warmer. She owed him her life, but more than that, she owed him her freedom. And as they stood there, a moment of peace finally won. No one noticed a subtle distortion in the air a few miles out to sea. A ripple in space, like a pebble dropped in a perfectly still pond. It had no physical form. It was a shifting, geometric anomaly. A patch of wrongness against the fabric of reality. The whisper of the end had arrived. It had been drawn by the immense, reality-warping flare of the Etherean blast and Naruto's subsequent absorption of it. It observed the man on the beach. It analyzed his energy. It cross-referenced the event with the data from Galuna Island. The conclusion was instantaneous and absolute. Nexus anomaly. Threat level. Apex. Corruption of local reality matrix is extensive. Active and aggressive manipulation of fundamental forces observed. Pruning protocols recommended. The scout sent a single, silent pulse of information back into the void, a message to its master. The target was confirmed. The hunt was now truly on. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Question of Strength. Fairy Tales. New Guild Hall was a monument to their resilience. It was grander than the old one, the wood still smelling of fresh pine and varnish, the windows gleaming. But the mood within was subdued. Urza's return, free from the ghosts of her past, should have been a cause for celebration. Instead, a heavy, anticipatory silence hung in the air. Master Makarov was gone, having departed for a regular council meeting of the guild masters. But his absence felt more significant this time. Naruto felt the shift immediately. It was in the way people spoke in hushed tones, the way they kept glancing at the second-floor balcony. He sat with Urza, who was quieter than usual, a thoughtful melancholy having replaced her usual stern demeanor. She was no longer hiding behind her armor, literally or figuratively. And the newfound vulnerability was both a strength and a burden. She watched him now, not just as a comrade, but as a confidant, the only one who had seen the deepest, darkest parts of her past and had not flinched. The quiet was shattered when a new face appeared in the guild. A woman with long, blonde hair and a revealing outfit, her face a mask of cold indifference. It was Evergreen, one of the 3 members of the Thunder Legion. Laxus Dreyer's personal bodyguards. The Fantasia parade is approaching, she announced, her voice carrying across the hall. Laxus has decided it's time for a change in leadership. It's time to find out who is truly the strongest in Fairy Tale. She raised her hands, and her eyes, normally hidden behind glasses, flared with a strange light. Stone eyes. A wave of magic washed over the room. Lucy, Urza, Juvia, and every other female wizard in the hall froze, their bodies turning to solid stone, their faces locked in expressions of shock. What did you do to them? Natsu roared, fire erupting around him. Another voice said. A man with green hair and an elegant demeanor, Fried Justine, stepped out from behind Evergreen. He held a rapier, and with it, he drew glowing purple runes in the air, sealing the guild's exits. The rules have been set. This is the battle of Fairy Tale. Fight each other. The last one standing gets to challenge Laxus. Those who try to leave, or break the rules, will face the wrath of the runes. The third member, a hulking man in a bizarre tiki mask named Bixlow, cackled, his tongue lolling. Let the game begin, babies. Chaos erupted. Panic set in. Some members, hot-headed and eager to prove their strength, immediately started fighting. Others tried to reason, only to be met with fists. The guild hall, so recently and lovingly rebuilt, was once again turning into a battlefield. Naruto watched the scene unfold, his expression one of profound disappointment. This wasn't a war. This wasn't an external threat. This was a family turning on itself. He looked at the petrified forms of Urza and Lucy, at Mirajan who had been in the cellar and was spared, her face a mask of horror as she emerged to see what had happened. This wasn't a question of strength. It was a failure of it. This is foolish, Naruto said, his voice quiet but cutting through the noise of the first few scuffles. Fried turned to him, his expression smug. The strong rule the weak. It is the natural order. Laxus will forge Fairy Tale into a guild that commands respect, not mockery. Respect isn't commanded, Naruto countered, his eyes cold. It's earned. And you don't earn it by turning your family into a blood sport. He started walking towards the main door, where Fried's runes glowed menacingly. The runes will not permit you to leave, Fried warned. Only those over the age of 80 or made of stone may pass. Naruto didn't even look at him. He walked right up to the glowing purple barrier. He didn't try to force his way through. He didn't try to dispel the magic. He simply placed his hand on the invisible wall. He closed his eyes, and the golden pigmentation of sage mode bled around them. He wasn't drawing on massive power. He was listening. He felt the intricate formula of Fried's jutsu shiki, the magical language that powered the enchantment. It was complex, elegant, and built on a foundation of rules. So, I'll follow the rules, he thought. He channeled a minuscule, precise amount of transformation chakra into his own body. It wasn't a full transformation jutsu. It was a subtle, conceptual shift. He nged the nature of his own biological signature, aging it, twisting it. For a fraction of a second, to the senses of the enchantment, he was not a young man in his late teens. He was an entity that had existed for centuries. He took a step. He passed through the rune barrier as if it wasn't there. Fried's jaw dropped. His perfect, unbreakable jutsu shiki, his life's work, had just been casually bypassed. The man hadn't broken the rule. He had bent reality to fit it. The sheer, casual mastery of it was more terrifying than any brute force. I'm not playing your game, Naruto said, turning back to the stunned guild members. But I won't let you tear this family apart. He vanished from the doorway. His first stop was the Cardia Cathedral, the tallest point in Magnolia. There, Laxus Drayar sat on a throne of stone, looking down on his game, with a contemptuous smirk. Naruto appeared on the rooftop behind him, his arrival as silent as the grave. This has to stop, Laxus. Laxus didn't seem surprised. He just glanced over his shoulder, a bolt of lightning crackling between his fingers. So, you're the new guy. The one who took down Phantom Angelo. I heard you were strong. Too strong for a weak guild like this. The guild isn't weak, Naruto stated. You are. Laxus's smirk vanished, replaced by a snarl. What did you say to me? He stood up, his massive frame crackling with electrical energy. He was a force of nature, a living thunderstorm. Power isn't just about how hard you can hit, Naruto said, his voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the storm brewing around Laxus. It's about what you protect. Makarov built a home, a sanctuary for the lost and the broken. You're trying to turn it into a cage, where only the strong survive. You're trying to burn down your own home to prove you can handle the heat. That's not strength, it's fear. You're afraid the guild's reputation makes you look weak. Every word was a perfectly aimed blow, striking not at Laxus's pride, but at the deep-seated insecurity that fueled it. Shut up, Laxus roared, unleashing a bolt of lightning. Naruto didn't move. The lightning struck him dead on, and did nothing. The sage mode aura, combined with his own innate wind-style affinity, simply grounded the electrical energy, dissipating it harmlessly across his skin. He didn't even flinch. Your grandfather is a great man, Naruto continued, walking forward. Unperturbed by the lightning now crackling around his body. He understands that true strength is the power to lift others up, not push them down. You desecrate his legacy with this tantrum. Don't you dare speak his name. Laxus bellowed, his rage reaching its peak. He transformed, his body bulking up, scales appearing on his arms. Lightning Dragon Slayer magic. He unleashed his ultimate attack. Raging Bolt, a colossal sphere of lightning, a miniature sun of pure electrical fury, erupted from his body, consuming the entire rooftop. From within the blast, Naruto's voice emerged, calm and clear. You still don't get it. He raised his hand. Wind style. Rasengan. A sphere of pure, swirling chakra formed in his palm. It wasn't the Rasenshuriken. It was the original, a perfect ball of rotational power. He met Laxus's raging bolt with it. It wasn't a contest of power. It was a lesson in application. Laxus's attack was explosive, chaotic, and unfocused. Naruto's Rasengan was a pinpoint of perfect, controlled force. It drilled through the raging bolt like a bullet through water, striking Laxus squarely in the chest. The impact wasn't a massive explosion. It was a focused, Devastating blow that cancelled out Laxus's magic and sent him flying back, crashing into his stone throne, shattering it. He was defeated, not by overwhelming power, but by superior control and a fundamentally stronger philosophy. As Laxus lay gasping, defeated, Naruto walked over to him. He didn't gloat. He looked down at the man who had torn their family apart. Strength isn't about being the last one standing, Naruto said, his voice quiet. It's about making sure everyone has a place to stand to begin with. He left Laxus there, amidst the ruins of his own ambition, and vanished. While Naruto confronted Laxus, the battle raged across Magnolia. Freed, his pride wounded by Naruto's casual dismissal of his runes, had set up new enchantments, forcing guildmates into one-on-one duels. Kana and Juvia were locked in a stalemate. Elfman, in a desperate bid to protect Miragen from Freed, pushed his beast soul to its limits, finally achieving a full-body takeover, defeat. Sol of the Element 4 in a climactic battle. Miragen, however, was cornered. Freed Justine stood before her, his rapier pointed at her heart. He had just defeated Elfman, who had overexerted himself. It is a pity, Freed said, a hint of regret in his voice. Your brother fought valiantly, but now, it is your turn, Miragen. The she-demon, show me the power you have kept hidden for so long. Miragen trembled, tears in her eyes. The trauma of her younger sister Lizana's supposed death had caused her to seal away her formidable Satan soul magic, terrified of its destructive power. No, I can't, I won't fight a comrade. Then you will fall, Freed said, preparing a final strike. He's right, Mira. A voice, calm and warm, spoke from behind her. Miragen turned. Naruto was standing there, a gentle smile on his face. He hadn't appeared in a flash of speed. He had just arrived. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and a wave of comforting warmth flowed through her. Your power isn't a curse, he said softly. His eyes meeting hers, he saw the deep-seated fear, the grief she had carried for years. It's a part of you. Just like my power is a part of me. He thought of Kurama, of the years he was feared as a monster. Hiding it away won't protect anyone. It just leaves you helpless when the people you love are in danger. He looked past her, at Freed. Your strength, Mira, is your heart. Your love for your brother and sister. Your love for this guild. Don't be afraid to use your power to protect that love. It doesn't make you a demon. It makes you a guardian. His words were a key, unlocking a door she had sealed shut long ago. She looked at her fallen brother, at the man threatening her home, and at the quiet, powerful man beside her who understood the burden of monstrous power better than anyone. A fire she thought long extinguished rekindled in her soul. Her expression changed. The gentle, sweet barmaid vanished, replaced by something fierce, primal, and magnificent. A torrent of dark purple energy erupted from her body. Her form shifted, grew. Wings sprouted from her back, her hair wild, claws extending from her fingers. She had unleashed her Satan soul. Freed stared, a thrill of fear and excitement running through him. This was the legendary power he had wanted to see. But Naruto stepped in front of the transformed Miragen, shielding her from Freed. No, Naruto said, his voice firm. She doesn't have to prove anything to you. He looked at Freed, his eyes now holding a hint of the Golden Sage power. The game is over. Laxus has lost. Freed froze. Lies. No one can defeat Laxus. I did, Naruto said simply. There was no boast in his voice, just a statement of fact. He's waiting for you at the cathedral. Go. The battle is finished. The absolute certainty in his voice, combined with the memory of how Naruto had effortlessly bypassed his runes, broke Freed's resolve. He wavered, then bowed his head, his pride shattered. I understand. He turned and left, his fight gone. Naruto turned back to Miragen. She was still in her demonic form, the immense power thrumming around her. She looked at her clawed hands, a flicker of her old fear returning. Naruto reached out and gently took her hand. His touch was warm, not repulsed by her demonic form. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. See, he said, his smile genuine. You're still you, and you're magnificent. Miragen stared at him, her demonic eyes wide. He wasn't afraid of her. He didn't see a monster. He saw her. He had not only given her the courage to embrace her power again, But he had also shielded her from having to use it against a friend. He had protected her body, and then he had healed her heart. The dark power receded. She returned to her normal form, stumbling slightly. Naruto caught her, holding her steady. For a long moment, they just stood there, his arms supporting her. The admiration she had felt for him during the Phantom Lord War now blossomed into something deeper, more personal. A profound, heartfelt affection. The final piece of Laxus's plan was his most cruel. A thunder palace of lightning lacrima surrounded the city, threatening to rain down destruction on the innocent citizens of Magnolia if his demands weren't met. It was a final, desperate gambit. Fairy Tale's wizards, now free from the curse, worked furiously to destroy the lacrima. But each one they destroyed unleashed a powerful electrical backlash on the attacker. It was a self-punishing task. Urza, her stone curse broken by her own immense magical power and a little help from Natsu, took charge. She directed the guild, her strategic mind clear and focused. She re-equipped into her Lightning Empress armor and began absorbing and destroying the lacrima herself, taking the brunt of the damage. Naruto found her on a rooftop, her body racked with spasms from the electrical feedback. "Urza, you have to stop," he said, his voice tight with concern. "I can't," she gritted out, her body trembling. "This is my responsibility. I'm one of the guild's strongest. I have to protect it." "You don't have to do it alone," he said. He looked up at the sky, at the hundreds of floating lacrima. A frontal assault was inefficient. He needed a more elegant solution. He closed his eyes and extended his senses. He felt the network of magic connecting all the lacrima back to a central control room. One of Freed's masterpieces. It was designed to trigger them all if Laxus was defeated. A dead man's switch. If you can't break the chain, break the anchor, he thought. He created a dozen shadow clones. "Find the control room," he commanded. "It's hidden somewhere in the city. Go." The clones scattered, a dozen golden blurs spreading across Magnolia. While his clones searched, he turned his attention back to Urza. He saw another wizard about to destroy a lacrima and get electrocuted. Naruto moved. He created a Rasengan in his hand, but instead of using it as an attack, he held it up and reshaped its nature. The swirling chakra became a vortex, not of wind, but of pure absorption. As the wizard destroyed the lacrima, the backlash of lightning shot out, but instead of hitting the wizard, it was drawn into Naruto's swirling vortex, harmlessly absorbed and neutralized. He appeared all over the city in the span of a minute, a golden blur of light, protecting his comrades as they did the hard work. He was a perfect shield. Finally, one of his clones reported back. "Found it. Below the cathedral, intricately woven." "Disrupt it," Naruto ordered. "Don't destroy it, just sever the connection to the lacrima." The clone complied. Deep beneath the city, a single, precise pulse of chakra, shaped like a microscopic needle, pierced the heart of Freed's master rune. The complex formula unraveled. In the sky above Magnolia, the menacing red glow of the hundreds of Thunder Palace lacrima fizzled out at once, turning into inert, useless crystals that began to drift harmlessly to the ground. The threat was over. Later, during the Fantasia parade, a somber mood prevailed. Laxus, by order of the master, was excommunicated from Fairy Tale. As the parade passed by the cathedral, Laxus watched from the shadows. Makarov, standing on a float, raised his hand, his index finger and thumb pointed up, the rest of his fingers curled, a secret sign between him and his grandson, one that meant, "Even if I can't see you, I'll always be watching over you." Laxus broke down in tears, his pride finally washed away by the love of the family he had tried to destroy. Naruto stood in the crowd, watching the scene. He saw the pain in Makarov's eyes, the profound sorrow of a grandfather casting out his own blood for the good of the family. He understood the sacrifice. He understood the love. He felt a hand slip into his. He looked down to see Lucy, her eyes also wet with tears. On his other side, Urza stood, her gaze fixed on the parade, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. From a nearby food stall, he could see Mirajan watching him, her smile gentle and full of a new, warm light. He had saved the day, not with overwhelming force, but by showing them all a different kind of strength. The strength to protect, to forgive, and to believe in the bonds of family, even when they were tested. But as he stood there, Surrounded by the warmth of his new home, a cold premonition slid down his spine. The whisper of the end. The silent observer from the Tower of Heaven had not been idle. It had been watching all of this. It had seen him bypass the runes. It had seen him ground the lightning. It had seen him neutralize the Thunder Palace. It had seen him impose his will on the fundamental laws of this world, not once, but repeatedly. Each action was another piece of data, another line in the report being compiled for a cold, cosmic god. The anomaly wasn't just powerful. It was adaptable, it was intelligent, and it was integrating itself into the fabric of this reality, strengthening it, changing it. To Malachor, this was the equivalent of a virus rewriting its host's DNA. It was an intolerable corruption. The time for simple observation was over. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Nirvana's Song of Emptiness. The aftermath of the Battle of Fairy Tail was a time of quiet healing. Laxus was gone, but the lessons of his rebellion remained. The guild, having been tested from within, emerged stronger. Their bonds tempered in the fires of conflict. Naruto, once the mysterious newcomer, was now an undisputed pillar of their family. His actions hadn't just saved them, they had redefined their understanding of strength. He was no longer just a powerhouse, he was their strategist, their guardian, their moral compass. He moved through the guild with a quiet confidence that drew others to him. A silent leader who never sought the role but wore it with natural grace. His relationship with the women who had come to care for him deepened in the peaceful days that followed. With Lucy, it was an easy camaraderie, filled with shared jokes and the comfortable silence of two people who understood each other's lonely pasts. With Urza, it was a bond of warriors, forged in mutual respect and a shared understanding of duty and sacrifice. They would often spar in the forest outside Magnolia, a breathtaking dance of her flashing swords and his fluid taijutsu. These weren't battles to win. They were conversations held in the language of combat. With Mirajan, it was quieter, more subtle. She would save him the best seat at the bar, her smile holding a special warmth just for him, and they would talk for hours. Two souls who understood the burden of carrying immense power beneath a gentle exterior. This fragile peace was shattered by a summons. An alliance was being formed. A new dark guild, the Oración Cis, had emerged, their goal shrouded in mystery but their power undeniable. They consisted of only 6 members, yet their strength was said to be great enough to rival the entire Balam alliance of dark guilds. To counter this threat, Fairy Tail was asked to send its strongest members to join forces with 3 other official guilds, Blue Pegasus, Lamia Scale, and Kate Shelter. The meeting point was a sprawling forest villa owned by the master of Blue Pegasus. Fairy Tail's chosen representatives were Urza, Natsu, Gray, and Lucy. Makarov, his eyes lingering on Naruto, made a final decision. Naruto, you will go as well, the master declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. Your perspective is unique. You see the battlefield in ways we do not. You will be their commander. It wasn't a request, it was an order that the entire guild supported with a resounding cheer. Urza nodded in sharp agreement, her trust in his strategic mind absolute. They arrived at the villa to a flamboyant welcome from the Trimons of Blue Pegasus, whose over-the-top flirtations were amusing to everyone except Naruto, who simply regarded them with a blank, unimpressed stare. Hat seemed to suck the charisma right out of them. They were soon joined by the members of Lamia Scale, led by the stern but powerful Juranikis, and a young, timid girl named Wendy Marvell and her cat Carla. The sole representatives from Kate Shelter. The final guild to arrive was Mermaid Heel. Their master was not present. They were led by their ace, a young woman with long, dark hair tied in a severe ponytail and an aura of cold, focused intensity. She carried a sheathed katana at her hip and walked with a purpose that bordered on aggression. Her name was Kagura Mikazuki. The moment she entered the room, her eyes scanned the assembled wizards, dismissing most of them, until her gaze fell on Naruto. Her dark eyes narrowed. There was an instant, palpable tension. She was like a drawn bowstring. And something about Naruto's calm, powerful presence was the target she was seeking. The alliance meeting began, with Ichiya from Blue Pegasus attempting to lead. It quickly devolved into chaos, with Natsu and Gray starting a fight and the others bickering. Naruto remained silent, observing the dynamics of the new group. He saw the strength in Jura, the potential in Leon who was representing Lamia scale. The fear in young Wendy, and the barely contained rage in Kagura. Enough, Naruto's voice cut through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it had a weight that commanded attention. Everyone stopped and looked at him. The Oración Cease are 6 wizards, he began, walking to the center of the room. We are many. Our advantage is numbers and diversity of skill. Theirs is coordination. They have worked together for years. We have been allies for 10 minutes. He looked at each of them in turn. We will not beat them by acting as a mob. We will act as a single unit. I will be your field commander. Urza, Jura, you will lead the 2 main assault teams. Natsu, Gray, Leon, your power is destructive, you are the vanguard. Lucy, Wendy, your support magic is crucial, you will stay in the rear and protect our flanks. Kagura, he turned to the silent swordswoman. Your skill is in single combat. You will be our scalpel. Our assassin. You will move with me. We will target their leader. His plan was simple, logical, and delivered with an authority that left no room for the usual guild rivalries. Even Jura, one of the 10 wizard saints, found himself nodding in agreement. Kagura, however, bristled. I do not take orders from you, she said, her voice like ice. My blade is my own, and it is useless if you point it at the wrong enemy, Naruto countered, his gaze unwavering. Your anger, it's unfocused. You are looking for a target worthy of it. The Oración Cease will provide. But if you let that anger cloud your judgment, you will be the first to fall. His words struck a nerve. Kagura's hand tightened on the hilt of her sword. You know nothing about me. I know enough, he replied, his mind flashing to Sasuke, to a boy consumed by a similar, all-consuming fire. Before their standoff could escalate, the villa was attacked, the ground erupted, and the 6 members of the Oración Cease appeared. Their leader, a man named Brain, simply smiled. We are here for the light. We are here for Nirvana. The battle was immediate and disastrous. The alliance, despite Naruto's warning, was unprepared for the sheer, bizarre power of their opponents. One member, Racer, moved at impossible speeds, blitzing their ranks. Another, Hotai, used liquefaction magic to turn the ground to mud. A woman named Angel used angel magic, summoning powerful celestial beings. Urza was struck WN by a venomous snake from a staff-wielding member named Cobra, who could hear their every thought, every plan. The alliance was shattered in moments. In the chaos, the Oración Cease accomplished our goal. They kidnapped Wendy Marvell and fled. Naruto had been moving to intercept Brain when he saw Urza fall. His priorities shifted instantly. He appeared at her side, his hand glowing with green light as he immediately began to counteract the fast-acting poison. It was potent, a magical toxin designed to stop the heart. Cobra, he can hear our thoughts, Urza gasped, her body trembling. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That explained how they had anticipated every move. He sealed the poison in Urza's system, a temporary measure, but it saved her life. Don't think, he commanded the others who were regrouping around him. Just react. Follow my lead. They tracked the Oración Cease into the depths of the Worthwood Sea, a forest where the trees themselves seemed to move and shift. It was there they discovered the enemy's true goal. Nirvana. It wasn't a person or an object. It was a legendary magic, a colossal city-like structure buried beneath the forest. A magic that could invert the light and darkness in a person's heart, turning good to evil and vice versa. Brain's plan was to use Wendy, a sky dragon slayer with healing capabilities, to revive a man who knew Nirvana's location, Jelil Fernandez. They found him, revived but amnesiac, his memory wiped clean by the self-destruction of the R system. He only remembered one name, Urza. This new, gentle Jelil, stripped of his madness, released the seal on Nirvana in a daze. And the ancient city rose from the earth, a terrifying construct of black stone and twisted spires, walking on 6 colossal legs. The true battle had begun. As the alliance chased the moving city, Naruto decided on a new strategy. He needed to test the capabilities of his most unpredictable new ally. Kagura, he said, as they ran through the forest. We're going scouting. You and me. I am not your subordinate, she repeated, her tone still frigid. No, you're my partner for this mission, he corrected. I need to know what you can do. And I need to know if I can trust you not to let your rage get us both killed. She stopped, her hand flying to the hilt of her katana. Are you challenging me? I'm evaluating you, he said, his voice level. He stopped and turned to face her. Show me the strength you're so proud of. She didn't need a second invitation. She drew her sword, archenemy, in a flash of silver. She didn't charge, she simply shifted her stance. And the very air around her seemed to warp. Sword style of the undrawn sword. She lunged, her speed supernatural. The attack was a blur, an Iijutsu strike of impossible speed and precision. She didn't aim to kill, but to disable, a single, perfect slash aimed at his shoulder. Naruto didn't draw a weapon. He didn't use a jutsu. He just moved. He met her blade not with a block, but with a parry. Using the back of his hand, which was reinforced with a thin, invisible layer of chakra. The clang of steel against his skin echoed through the forest. He deflected her blade, redirecting her momentum, spinning her off balance. She recovered instantly, her footwork flawless, and launched into a furious barrage of slashes, each one fast enough to be invisible to a normal eye. Each one precise enough to cut a single hair. She was a whirlwind of sharp steel and focused fury. Naruto became a study in absolute calm. He moved with her, his body flowing like water around her attacks. He never took his eyes off hers. He wasn't just defending. He was reading her, learning her rhythm, her tells, the source of her anger that fueled her flawless technique. He saw it in the slight tightening of her jaw, the flicker of raw hatred in her eyes when she put her full force behind a strike. This wasn't just a fighting style, it was an expression of her pain. Your anger makes you strong, he said, his voice calm even as he deflected a thrust aimed at his throat with 2 fingers. But it also makes you predictable. It's a single note, played over and over. You have no harmony, no peace. His words enraged her. She put everything into one final, powerful downward slash, aiming to cleave him in 2. Be silent. This time, Naruto didn't deflect. He caught the blade. He caught the flat of the blade between his palms. His hands clasped together as if in prayer. The force of the blow should have shattered his bones, but his hands held firm, the chakra within them absorbing the kinetic energy completely. The blade stopped, inches from his head. Kagura stared in shock, her arms trembling from the strain. He had stopped her full power strike. Bare-handed. I told you once, Naruto said, his voice dropping. His eyes boring into hers. About a friend I had. A brother. He was consumed by hatred, by a desire for revenge against the man who destroyed his family. He sought power at any cost, believing that his vengeance was the only thing that gave him purpose. He pushed the sword back, forcing a stunned Kagura to take a step back. I never stopped trying to save him, Naruto continued, his voice resonating with a deep, profound sorrow. Not because I wanted to forgive his crimes, but because I refused to let him be defined by them. I refused to let hatred be the final word in his story. Vengeance is a fire that consumes the bearer, Kagura. When it's over, when your enemy is dead, all you're left with is ash. And you'll be alone in the cold. He let go of her sword. You are more than your anger. You are more than your revenge. Don't let it be the only thing you have. Kagura stood there, breathing heavily, his words echoing in the silence. He had not only defeated her physically, with an ease that was humbling, but he had looked directly into her soul and diagnosed the sickness that she had mistaken for strength. He spoke of her path not with judgment, but with a sad, empathetic understanding. For the first time, a flicker of doubt entered her heart. A seed had been planted. Their moment was interrupted by a presence. A cold, chilling feeling that was becoming horribly familiar to Naruto. It's here, Kurama growled in his mind. Naruto's head snapped up. On a branch high in the trees, a figure was perched. It was not one of the Oración Seis. It was a shifting, indistinct shape. A blur of impossible geometry that seemed to hurt the eyes to look at. It had no face, no features, but Naruto felt its gaze on him, a cold, analytical scrutiny. The whisper of the end. It wasn't attacking. It was just watching, observing him, observing his interaction with Kagura, analyzing his power, his movements, his very soul. What is that thing? Kagura whispered, her hand tightening on her sword. All thoughts of their duel forgotten in the face of this new, unnatural horror. It's what's been hunting me, Naruto said grimly. The whisper seemed to register that it had been seen. It didn't flee. It simply faded. It dissolved into the air, not with a teleportation spell, but as if it were a projection that had just been switched off. The hunt had entered a new phase. The scout was no longer content to watch from a distance. It was getting closer. The true nature of Nirvana was then revealed. As it walked, it absorbed the negative emotions from the land, using them as fuel. And when it was ready, it would cast its light, inverting the good and evil in anyone caught in its range. Brain's plan was to turn the forces of light into an army of darkness. The Alliance was forced to fight on the moving city, battling the 6 generals while trying to destroy the giant lacrima crystals that powered each of Nirvana's legs. The battles were intense. Gray and Leon had to overcome their rivalry to defeat Racer. Lucy faced Angel in a battle of celestial spirits, a heartbreaking fight that ended with her sacrificing one of her own beloved spirits to win. Naruto and Kagura, now working as a tense but effective unit, moved towards the central spire. They were confronted by Cobra, the poison dragon slayer. "I can hear your every thought," Cobra hissed, a smug look on his face. "I know your every move before you make it. You cannot defeat me." Naruto just looked at him. "That's your weakness." He closed his eyes, and the golden sage mode pigmentation flared. He didn't just connect with natural energy. He submerged his consciousness in it. His mind became one with the wind, the stone of the moving city, the very air around them. His thoughts ceased to be a single voice and became a symphony of a million tiny, natural processes. Cobra clutched his head, screaming in agony. "What is this? What are you doing? It's too loud." He was being deafened by the roar of a world he had only been able to eavesdrop on before. His greatest strength had been turned into his greatest weakness. Kagura, seeing the opening, acted. Her blade was a blur, and Cobra was defeated. His senses completely overloaded. As they reached the throne room, they found Natsu facing the final, true form of the Oración Cease's leader. Brain had a split personality, his darker, more chaotic self known as Zero. Zero was a being of pure nihilism. "Everything is nothing," he roared, unleashing waves of dark, destructive magic that erased everything it touched. "Bonds, life, hope. They are illusions. I will return everything to the glorious void of nothingness." As Natsu struggled against the overwhelming tide of dark gravity, Naruto felt it again. That same energy, that same philosophy. Zero's nihilistic power, his desire to reduce everything to nothing, was a faint, crude echo of the cold, absolute emptiness he felt from Malachor. It was the same song, just a different key. "This world is full of so much life," Naruto said, stepping forward, his sage mode aura flaring. "So much noise, so much feeling." He looked at Zero, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a deep, profound pity. "You can't stand it, can you? The silence in your own heart is so deafening that you want to make the whole world quiet with you." He raised his hand, and a massive Rasengan, larger and more potent than any he had used before, formed in his palm, infused with the vibrant, chaotic energy of life itself. "Let me show you what true strength is." He wasn't just fighting a dark wizard anymore. He was fighting a philosophy. He was making a stand for life against the encroaching void, a void that had a name and was hunting him across dimensions. This was a rehearsal for the real war to come. Chapter 7 End.